Just call this meeting to order for the special board meeting here at the Porter Room on May 13, 2024. Roll call.
Shimon Rogers. Shaw.
Here.
Travis.
Here.
Navarro.
Here.
Teese.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Osei. Here. Del Ponte. Here. Lopez Caniva.
Here. All right, if we can all stand for our pledge of allegiance. And if we can all join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's see. Ms. Johnson, would you like to be the pro tem secretary in the absence of
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Shimon Rogers?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. All right, information reports.
All right, hey, I'm going to kick things off. I feel a little bit like the teacher. You come in, and we're going to have a movie. We're not going to turn the lights off. So, sometimes you're very excited when the teacher's showing a movie. But I thought there was a piece that Fox News did a couple weeks ago. And if we could do this, there are plenty of seats. There's a bunch of seats. Some of our friends who are coming in, they can't see. So we've got two seats right over here. Hey, Mark, if you'd like to sit right over here, there's a seat there. What we want to try to do over there is we have to keep that egress open in a public meeting. Gosh forbid if, something happened. So we're just trying not to have chairs in kind of the opening there. So lots of seats right here, for sure. But there was a really nice spot Fox News did a couple of weeks ago that I thought brought together a number of things, both about facilities and about finances. And what they spotlighted is our advanced auto shop, which is a small class, relatively by our standards. Most of our classes are about 25 to 30 students per class. That's a pretty standard size, most high schools. That's an economic feature of most public high schools. Two, it's a double period class. So it's one teacher teaching two classes. So one teacher, two classes, but it's a capstone class. And a really amazing thing happened this year where all 13 of those students went out to do what's called their ASE certification. And if you go any place where you're getting your car fixed and you see they have the patch ASE, it means that these individuals taken a national certification and they're professionally qualified. Might not have all the experience you'd want with an auto mechanic. But really, it's a confluence of the finances that the board have put behind having a class like that. But in this news spot, the facilities, I think, for everybody here, are the secret star of the show. I would argue in my work as a school principal, especially in automotive, it matters the type of facilities you have. Do you have a facility that's state-of-the-art? Do you have a facility? I've been in facilities where we could only have one car for about 20 students to work on because that was the size of the facility. So in 2017, an addition was made. You'll see this facility. But it's a great story about how facilities support learning. All 13 of these young men could go right out and start working professionally now as auto mechanics. Not all of them are. A number of them are going to go to a four-year college. That's great that they have those options. So just want to take a second just to take a look at this.
Some local high school students are getting a unique opportunity to connect the classroom with the professional world.
Dave Flacco takes a look at an auto class shop that truly is one of a kind.
Lots of high schools have auto shop classes, but here at Lockport Township High School, they've taken it to a whole new level. Take a look. Every single one of these students this year has received certification to work professionally.
So today, what we have going on, we've got two main vehicles that we got to look at.
It's first period in Mark De La Vega's advanced auto shop class, and 13 seniors are getting their marching orders.
Any questions? All right, let's have at it.
With that, the students head into the school's full-service auto repair shop, where they learn skills that have already put them on a professional track.
I've learned everything from brakes to engine diagnosis to air conditioning, like literally everything I've learned on suspension, everything. It's so awesome.
So what they're doing is they're scrolling through the different sensors on the vehicle.
De La Vega has been teaching auto shop in Lockport for 21 years. But this year, he decided to try something different. The entire class took the test for an ASE certification, that's Automotive Service Excellence, that would allow them to work professionally.
I went out on a limb and wanted these boys especially to try and gain the certification.
All 13 took the test in class, and all 13 passed.
I had figured there would be a handful, but I did not expect 13. That was quite a surprise to me.
Which has allowed many of the students to go to work professionally at local car dealerships and auto mechanics.
Right now I'm actually working as a body shop right down here in Lockport.
I recently got a job at Rod Baker Ford in Naperville.
So you're a senior in high school, yet you can work as a professional mechanic now.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
It really is.
It's crazy to think that like I can go have a job somewhere with the certification and be able to use it. I mean, it's all thanks to the auto program here.
And while most of these students plan on going to college or advanced training in trade school, they know they already have the skills that'll open doors and start engines.
As soon as you get that ASE certification, it tells them, hey, I'm actually trying to pursue this in the future.
It's wonderful to just get your hands dirty, work on things, experience what you could do with all this. And I mean, it's endless what you could do with it.
If I had to say what's special, it's the students. The types of students that I get in every year is what makes this job fun. To me, this is not a job. Teaching is not a job for me, especially with these guys in this class.
So where do all these cars come from? Well, many of them belong to teachers here at the high school, which tells you just how much they trust the hard work of these students. In Lockport, Dane Placco, Fox 32 Chicago.
You had multiple cars, usually 2 or 1 student per car working on it. Consequences in 13 people who are professionally certified in an area where we need auto mechanics. Probably every single person in this room, needs an auto mechanic who's qualified and can do it, whether those students do that or not. So I just thought it was a good way to kick that off, and really appreciate our public relations department for picking up on that, kind of a unique thing that Mark De La Vega did.
My understanding is that all 13 of those students passed the test.
Yeah, all 13 are certified.
Yes.
So whether they're going to use that in their professional lives or not, but they at least have the option
Exactly.
in a high-need industry as well.
Or even on a personal level, to have them change
Right.
their own way. All right, thank you.
Hey, our first report tonight, Mrs. Lopez-Caniva, do you mind if I introduce
Sure.
this? Or is from DLA Architects. They're here with us tonight. They're going to update the board on the work that they've done to identify life safety work at our campus. So I do not see, you're behind there. Eric Sickler, Rich, come on down and, and if there's anything you need me to, I have some of the documents that the board has, but, this is really just an update and an opportunity for you to, ask Eric and his colleague Rich is right behind me.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Yep, here to answer any questions you might have, but I think what I'll first do is give you an update on where we are currently with the school as it stands. We've done the demolition work, so that's all been taken care of. Now we're in the throes of trying to get all of that demo work repaired. But in the process of the demo work, we thought it would be prudent for us to go and take a look at the structure now that it's all exposed, not only the roof structure, but also the floor structure of the building where the ceilings were removed. We were able to discover some areas of the structure that did need some minor repairs. And so we put that into the current projects that we're working on in the bidding process right now. So putting the ceilings back in, the lighting and the grid and all of that is currently out to bid, and we'll have that coming in shortly. And then we'll be before the board again for a bid approval for whoever is the lowest bid for that work. Then we anticipate that work to be completed by this coming fall, so that the students can come back into the school. So we know that's a high importance for the district, and so we're working as best as we can to make that happen. So That's where we currently are with the project that's out there. The next steps, right? What do we do next? Basically, we have the life safety survey that was done, I believe, back in 2016, 2017, required by the school district to do. Mr. Thompson, the facilities manager, he has actually taken care of a whole heck of a lot with the budget that he had. And so we've had meetings with him to discuss what's left on that list to be done and what are the priorities of that list. And I believe that you've been issued that list of the final result of those meetings. So that's kind of where we're at, and the totals of those items right now are around $26 million to take care of that, 27 million. To take care of those items that are a high priority of whatever's left on that life safety report. The life safety report requires the school district to complete those items eventually. So eventually those items on the report would need to be done. This is just a high priority. Obviously there's more work to be done there, but this is definitely a high priority. I'll go quickly through the list. I know you have the list already, but we thought that replacing the roof, the envelope is always the first thing that you want to attack when you're dealing with an old facility. Make sure that the roof is intact and that the walls are not allowing moisture in, because moisture can definitely do a lot of damage if it gets within the facility. So the roof has been patched and patched and patched throughout its lifetime. And pretty much some of those roofs are back in the 1980s, so well beyond their life expectancy. And so we highly recommend that the roof of the entire school gets replaced with a new roof. So that's one of our highest priorities. Main electrical systems, as some of you have heard, and we have discovered once we did the demolition that yes, there is still some cloth wiring within the building. And also the sub panels and the electrical distribution panels are old. So people might think, well, why do they need to be replaced? Like everything else, that it is metal, they get rusty and they don't necessarily allow the electrical current to pass as well as it should. And so highly recommend those items to be replaced. Domestic water systems, they're galvanized piping in there, so that's another one of the recommendations is to replace the domestic water system in that building. On top of that, also to put in a filtering system that'll allow once we get the new piping in there, to last a lot longer. Not only the piping, but also the fixtures that the water is being run through. Some of the larger projects of the life safety report we're recommending would be installing a sprinkler system in the building and in its entirety. I believe it's very minimal currently, if any sprinkler systems are in the building. We highly recommend to do that. And some of the bigger items on the life safety report were fire doors aren't operating correctly. Those are a high priority. And also a lot of the existing stairs do not comply with the school code, being open to the corridors. If anybody's done a walkthrough of Central, you'll go up those big stairs that are in the middle of the core of the building. There is no door separating that from the main hallway, so that is not code compliant, so recommend to do that. And then primarily, a lot of the classroom doors open right into the corridor of the schools, and that is a code violation. They should not extend more than 7 inches into the corridor. If you can imagine an emergency and people trying to get out of the building, they're running down the hallway. If somebody opens the door, we want to prevent them from having to run into that and causing some trouble by not allowing them to exit freely out of the building. So recommend that. Windows and lintels, again, this goes back out to the exterior of the building. Recommend to get the windows. Most of those windows are original. There have been some windows that have been replaced, but probably 80% of the windows still are single pane and should be replaced. Not only if we're replacing the windows, we should be replacing the lintels. That's one thing that we discovered. When you look on the outside, the lintels look pretty adequate and doing their job, but when we remove the ceilings and we're able to see those lintels on the inside of the building, there was a lot of work that needed to be done. So that, we don't know the full extent of that, but would recommend that while we're replacing the windows. A lot of miscellaneous life safety littler items, too numerous to mention, but we would want to make sure that we hit some of those which are of a higher priority. Getting back to the exterior building as well, tuck pointing, we've done a lot of tuck pointing in the past. Would recommend to finish that off to make sure that we, tuck pointing is really basically repairing and refurbishing the mortar joint between the bricks. It can become porous as it gets older and allows water to infiltrate into the building. So I want to make sure that that's addressed, along with some of the parapets definitely need to be repaired. That's the top of the masonry wall when it gets above the roof. That's the parapet of the school, and some of those definitely are starting to fail a little bit, so we need to get those repaired. One of the bigger items was replacing the HVAC system, which would include a boiler, air conditioning, and also bringing in some fresh air, which currently you can bring in fresh air, but that's bringing in fresh air means opening up a window, and it's not necessarily the most efficient way to run a school when it's in like 13 below outside, and they have to open a window to get the fresh air in. So recommend that. Also on the list, that's not necessarily life safety. Those are the life safety items that we have recommended. Now we're moving into a list that aren't qualified on a life safety list as of yet. Some of these items could be moved into a life safety item, but not all. And some of those are the what were on the referendum, and that is to convert the pool locker room area into the new CCC Academy. And then update some of the classrooms, remodel the restrooms. Those doesn't make sense too much, but ADA is not a life safety item except for one restroom per floor, and also a pathway to a primary function within the school. All the other bathrooms do not comply or do not fall within a life safety item, but we do recommend that they should be addressed since they do not comply with the ADA code. Fire alarm systems, remodeling the cafeteria serving lines in the kitchen area to be more efficient, and just taking advantage of some of the unproductive spaces that are currently in the building, being able to convert them into a more productive space that can be used for the students on a day-to-day basis. And that pretty much sums it up pretty quick. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
I have a couple. So can you talk a little bit more about the water system and what that means, just for the public to understand what a galvanized water line is and what could happen if those aren't repaired or replaced, or?
Unlike copper, galvanized is a steel type made out of iron type product, so eventually does rust and corrode. You won't see that on the outside because the galvanizing aspects of the pipe will protect it on the outside, but when you have constant water running through, that piping will eventually start corroding and the pipe starts shrinking in its interior diameter to like even a pinprick. So it's really hard to get water to go through that system.
So that's why we need a new filtration for the pool?
That one's not going to be on our list of items to do because we're actually thinking that the pool might be obsolete and that we might not be having the pool operate. Is that on your list?
Yeah, it's on the list. It says new filtration system for pool.
Poor quality. We have a filter water, poor quality of water.
Below that, new filtration system
Oh,
for
system
pool,
of pool.
350,000.
That is if the pool is decided to move forward. We would recommend to do that, yes.
If the board keeps the pool open as opposed to using that space for the CCC Lockport Academy, you'd have to replace that. You know, that literally is the cost and more on some of the mechanicals of keeping the pool open.
Yeah, so apologize for that. You're right.
If you do that.
If you keep the pool operational, we would need to put a pool filtration system.
We recommend to use it for the CCC and the Lockport Academy, a better purposing of it, because we have a very large competition pool already here.
I don't think that would be a priority above everything else, though.
No, that's exactly what we're saying.
Right.
So when we talk about the finances of this, we're looking at some life safety projects over here on Central's campus, and then we have back here just recommendations of things that we do. A lot of people in our community are very concerned about the ADA issues. And I don't know if this is a question for Mr. Sickbert or if this is more of a question for PMA or district finances in general. Can you explain a little bit more as to, and you did mention it and touch on it, life safety projects versus ADA compliance, and what the buckets of money, I think, is the confusion in the community right now.
I can explain the first part of it. And
Okay.
Finance person.
And we have that coming up next, the finance part. We can take a swing at both of them.
Yeah. All right, so school code is run by state. I'll try not to get too much into the grass of this, but it's run by the state, and they require the school districts to walk the buildings every 10 years to make sure that the buildings are at a safe state of operation. Once we walk through that and we discover something that is on that code issue for schools, we mark that up and it becomes a life safety item. And so anything on that list, you can spend life safety funding for that particular item. The state does not recognize ADA and accessibility as a life safety issue. It's obviously a building operational issue, but it's not a life safety issue. And basically, life safety is primarily focusing on fire, protecting the students within the facilities to make sure they're safe from fire. That's primarily what the function of that is. So ADA does not necessarily fit within that.
And so now if you pick up on the financial point of view, so life safety bonds do not require electoral approval. And then anything over our debt service limit requires electoral approval. That doesn't really apply to life safety bonds. You as a board have talked about, for sure, staying below our debt service limit for many reasons. Results of the election, good financial order, how much debt do you take on, what impact does that have on the levy? So, we'll kind of get into it and talk about it. So one way is life safety bonds. That's debt for folks out there, just to kind of keep it simple. But then also, how do you get at some of these other issues? And that would be a conversation that we've had, and you've seen in your materials, of revising your cash on hand goal from 10 to 12 months of cash on hand to something more like 8 to 9 months, which would then swing some cash reserves over to address other priorities you have, like the CCC, Lockport Academy, Americans with Disability Act. Because even though, Americans with Disability Act is not technically life safety, I think anybody in here would want bathrooms, for example, a very basic human need to be accessible to anyone who comes into the building. If you want to go in the main gym, it would be nice if you could access it if you had any kind of ADA issue. Elevators, we have one elevator on the on the south side of the building. It could be very helpful if we had one on the north side of the building as well, or at minimum, that elevator on the south side being renovated, enlarged, just better mechanically and more updated. I could keep on going with the list of things that the board would be able to do to improve the access that people have to the facilities in the building. So that would be that kind of other financial strategy.
Yes.
Just because I don't know this, what are lentils?
Lentils, those are the, with masonry, you need to keep that masonry supported when you put a window in, so that lintel bridges that gap that's in the wall so that the load will transfer around the window and not go through the window. So it's basically holding up the wall that's above the window.
If you ever look, Luann, like a lot of window systems, you'll see brick, you'll see what looks like a piece of metal, and the window sits on top of it, and that's the lintel. It's a really, really common feature, especially in masonry buildings, but you see it in a lot of buildings here too. It just kind of supports that window.
I see it on our life safety, so ours we need to replace them because they're starting to deteriorate? Or?
Yes, when we removed the ceilings, we already had repaired a lot of the lintels in the past, because on the outside of the building, you can see that they needed some work. When we removed the ceilings, we found that there was a lot of work that needed to be done on other lintels, because on the inside, you could see the corrosion. Those are steel, so they do rust.
So rubber steel?
I'm sorry?
What kind of steel?
They're steel, so it will rust. They do get paint on them when they get installed, but eventually that wears away and then the lintels start rusting because they're exposed to moisture.
Eric, how many bidders do we expect?
How many bidders?
How many bidders?
For the current project? We were a little concerned about that. We had invited 21 contractors to bid on the work. Went down to one. When we had a pre-bid meeting and we were still about 16 that showed up for that. We did some calls to make sure that people were bidding the project. So now we're up to 4. So we made some calls and tried to make the project, let them know that there was some flexibility with releasing of the work, so that allows some more contractors to bid the job. So we currently have 4 bidders, which is great. Yes.
Any other questions?
I do want to prioritize while the roof, assuming we are going to be fixing up Central. Right now the roof is not built on. Why is a window replacement here for $2 million? I'm just curious as to, the windows the utmost priority right now?
Getting back to that, typically we highly recommend to get your exterior watertight, and those windows do leak, and they aren't very efficient since they are a single pane window, so allow the heat of transfer of water in and out, and that's some of the problem because you got the cold outside and you got the warm inside, you get condensation on those windows and that water just gets inside the building, and that's what that does start to deteriorate inside of the building. So that's what we want to try to replace the windows.
Is there any?
And just to add to that, Mr. Navarro, in your forensic architect report, what Eric just described was a significant contributor to the collapse of that plaster ceiling. Lack of temperature control, moisture, right? Windows in any facility have quite a bit to do with moisture and temperature control. So, yeah.
With the boilers and the heating system, would it be replaced in this new plan? Or I know it says that the failure is minimal and that at some point the heating system should be replaced, but would it be replaced in this plan or no?
That's up to the board to decide. It's definitely something that we're recommending that should be eventually. Those boilers are original boilers, not very efficient, but they do operate, and they have redundancy, which helps. So if a boiler does fail, we have 2 more boilers to keep the building warm. So, but again, the efficiencies of them and the maintenance of them, ongoing maintenance, I think they had a 2 fail just recently. So that's just going to consistently continue if they aren't replaced. So it's just a maintenance issue, but also efficiency issue, meaning it takes a lot of gas to heat the building versus what a boiler would look like today and its replacement.
In terms of efficiency, it's evenness in the building, right? The current steam heat,
Yes.
you can be in one building, it's boiling hot. You can, in one classroom, so say, it's boiling hot, you can go to another classroom, it's freezing cold. So you have that across the building just because it's not a very modern, not very efficient system. And that's one of the things that is always a threat to a vintage building, is lack of kind of consistent heating and cooling.
A lot harder to control steam heat than it is hot water heat. That's a lot easier to control.
And in terms of efficiency and repair, I think we've talked about this before. We're currently, if we need a part, it needs to be made. They don't make
the
part
tube
in our
that
current
recently
system.
failed has to be manufactured.
So we're spending more money on parts than we would for if something were to happen to a more modern
Right.
system.
They're just not on hand.
And I think we would see even a savings cost with a more efficient, heating system too.
So is this window replacement replacing all of the windows, or just the windows that are the most troublesome?
It's like I said, about 80% of the windows still. You've replaced some of the windows already. I think we have about 80% of the windows still to be replaced.
I just wanted to be able to remember that.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Next, we have PMA. Financial. How are you guys? So.
Welcome,
talk-
by the way.
Hi.
Bob Lewis from PMA. Now we talked about the projects, right? The life safety, what's next? How do we fund them is the next piece, right? And there's multiple ways we can do that. The primary funding option for school districts is issuing bonds, like Dr. McBride said, within our debt service extension base. I'll let Bob talk about bonds in a second. The other piece is using some existing fund balances, right? And so likely there would be some for all of those things on the project, because some would qualify for life safety bond funding, some wouldn't. Likely there will be some combination of using fund balances and issuing some debt. But I'll let Bob kind of talk about our debt options. Maybe just highlight, like I said, the pieces that they have.
Before we start, just for everybody here that's listening in, can you explain who PMA is really quick?
Sure. PMA is a financial services company. We do a lot of different services for units of government from the investment side. I work specifically in the debt side. Been doing public finance now 27 plus years. Most of that career has been at PMA. And I primarily work with school districts, but I do work with other units of government as well. So PMA, as a municipal advisor, as it relates to debt, we are the #1 financial advisor of schools in the state and have been for, I think, 16 or 17 years, something like that. So I will talk a little bit more about the school code that was referred to a bit ago. But before I talk about the school code, we do have to look at the tax cap law. And Stephanie mentioned this term called debt service extension base. That comes out of the tax cap law. So it's a concept that not only applies to school districts, it applies to park districts, community colleges, certain non-home rule villages and cities as well. And basically what it does, it limits your ability to borrow on a non-referendum basis because you are in a tax cap county. And that limit varies by entity, and it is determined by what your school district was levying for in 1994 for your non-referendum bond payment. So it's not the amount of non-referendum debt you had at the time, it's that payment that you had that year. And in levy year 1994, you had a levy of $1,838,000 to pay a payment of a bond issue that year. And that amount was tied to CPI back in 2009. So that amount has gone up every year. Well, that first year was 0.1%. So it wasn't much of a change in that first year, but it's gone up by whatever CPI is, except the last 2 years it only went up by 5%. It was just like the operating side where it was capped to be no more than 5. So now that limit stands at $2.6 million. So again, that caps the annual payment. So the way to think about this, and this is the way I think about it and explain it oftentimes to boards, is we all at one time went to purchase our first home. The first thing you start off with is, what can I afford for a monthly payment, right? And once I knew what I could afford for a monthly payment, the banks will loan you for 30 years. Wherever interest rates are at that time will determine how big of a house to look for. If I can only afford a $1,500 a month payment, I can't go out and look at $1 million home. I'm not going to be able to afford it because I can't fit it into my monthly budget. So your DSEB limits you in a similar way on how much you can actually access on a non-referendum basis. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But now that you know that you have a DSEB, you then have to go back to your governing statutes to see what type of borrowings can you do. And that's where the school code comes back into play. And there's 4 types of non-referendum bonds you're permitted to do. Really only 2 of them apply potentially your situation. What you've talked about a lot tonight are life safety bonds. In order to issue a life safety bond, you have to have approvals back from the state. You can't determine yourself, along with your architect, and come up with a $26 million number and say, hey, we think we have $26 million of life safety bonds, and then go sell, or excuse me, approvals, and then go sell $26 million of life safety bonds. You have to actually have the approvals back from the state. If they come back with 24.5, you can only sell 24.5. So that automatically governs how much you can do, in addition to what the tax cap law says. So it's two different controlling variables here: the tax cap law and the state on its life safety approvals. And then you do have to conduct a hearing prior to issuing life safety bonds. And that hearing is similar to your budget hearing or tax levy hearing, where it gives the public an opportunity to come in and talk specifically about that one item. Now, that hearing can be done at any amount you want. You could do a hearing for a $100 million life safety bond, but the state only comes back with 26 million. You can only sell 26 million. But if you do the hearing at 25 million and come back at 28, you're kept at 25. So it's important, if you begin with the hearing just to go through that process, you want to make sure you pick a high enough number if you don't actually have the approvals back yet. The other type of bond that can come into play sometimes on a non-referendum basis is a working cash bond. And why a lot of times those may be utilized by some schools is because there's more flexibility in how you spend the proceeds. So if you had projects that you wanted to do that didn't qualify as life safety, then the proceeds of a working cash bond could be used for that purpose. Now, because you are planning to use some of your own fund balances, your fund balances may be able to cover a significant portion of those things that don't qualify as life safety, so you may not need to use this other avenue of a working cash bond. If you did use a working cash bond, though, authorized again by the school code, what happens is those bonds close and then they're put into the working cash fund and you bait it to the capital projects fund. But in order to issue the working cash bond, you don't have to have any approvals from the state, but you do have to do that same hearing, but you also have a 30-day petition period. So the way that process begins is if a board of education passes a resolution to issue working cash bonds, an amount not to exceed X, that gets published in the paper, and then for the 30 days from publication, if 10% or more of the registered voters sign a petition, then that bond issue would have to go to referendum. Okay, so there's that additional step on that. And I think that the reason why I don't know for sure what was in the minds of the legislators way back when these laws were written. I think the thought is when life safety approvals, that's gone through the process of the state signing off on it, the working cash bonds go through this process of having the voters at least give you tacit approval by not filing a petition. So your debt service extension base graphically looks like, I think you have some handouts on this, but it looks like this. Oh, you have the scenario. Okay, so the first one you have is the scenario. I'll hold it up here. And your debt service extension base, or I'm going to call it DSEB from now on. So your DSEB is that red line. That's what we know now. And you'll notice at the beginning there's a little bit of slope. And that's because we're applying the 3.4% CPI that came out in January this year. And then we don't know what it is after that. So that's why it's straight across. The dashed line represents what it could be over time if it were to average, CPI were to average 1.5%. But we don't know that now. So the blue bars represent your current remaining debt service on your non-referendum bonds. You have no referendum bonds. I think your last referendum bond issue matured 10 years ago, give or take, something like that. It's been a while. And so the blue bars represent your current non-referendum payments. So you can see you're plenty below what your annual limit is on your non-referendum bonds. The green bars represent the potential principal and interest payments on a life safety bond if you get $26 million of approvals. And now, the years at the bottom represent levy years, so the actual payments would be 1 year later. There's always that lag. Your levy year is collected the next year. Now, what is the impact to the taxpayer? So your current bond payment is up to this blue bar. So if you take it all the way up to the red, this green bar here, that's about another $35 on a almost $300,000 home. The median home value that we have in here is $295,000. That comes from the American Community Survey of the Census Bureau. So you're almost doubling that payment. So currently, your taxpayers, if the levy was for this year, the blue bar would be about $35. It's about another $35 on top of that. So a total of $70 on a $300,000 home that would be going towards servicing debt. Now you notice we don't fill up the entire thing. So you think of this as a box. You statutorily can go out 25 years up to the height of the box, which is your DSEB. You could, if you were to fill that entire box, and that's a couple pages later, that looks like this one. We estimate now would be about $34.5 million. Now, why did I say estimate? Because just like your home mortgage, if you determine you have a $1,500 a month payment you can afford, from that payment you're paying principal and interest. So if interest rates go up, you have to look at a smaller home because the principal component will have to shrink if you're paying more interest. So as interest rates fluctuate, the amount that you can get would fluctuate. So right now the current estimate is 34.5, but that could go up, it could go down, just depending on interest rate movements. And then the other chart you have is a $30 million scenario. That would consume more of your debt service extension base. So the height of this, the green bars after about 5 years would be closer to the red line. Now, how would you go about issuing $30 million? That one of two things would have to happen. You'd either have to get back $30 million of life safety approvals, or if you got $26 million life safety approvals, you'd have to go through the process to do a $4 million working cash bond to get to a total of $30 million. Now, if you did that process, it's not actually sold as two bond issues, so you get the efficiencies of selling it as one. It's just that the description to the investors would say 26 million of this is authorized pursuant to the life safety portion of the school code, 4 million is authorized pursuant to the working cash portion of the school code.
So the different scenarios are illustrated to show, I know the board is talking about 26 million for the life safety portion, right? The different scenarios are given illustrating, like, you kind of strap yourself and lock the board in over the life of the bonds, where if something happens and we need to do something at East, or if we need to issue some other working cash debt for some other addition project, et cetera, you're limiting yourself by issuing all the way up to the max, right? No different than, you do take a mortgage on that's up to your limit, absolutely up to your limit, right? You don't get to do much after that, right? You can't put in that pool or whatever it is, right? So that's illustrated to show that. The other thing that you all might have a question on, because I did when I first looked at it, on each of these scenarios, and I think this is a 4th page in what the board has in their handout, is a summary showing the comparison, and the estimated tax impact is the same on all 3 scenarios. Okay, so the reason that it's like that is because of the way that the bonds are structured. So if you look at the 26 million scenario, you'll see that it's structured so that for 5 years, we wouldn't have any, and it's a matter of structuring the repayment, right? So for the first 5 years, the board would not be able to issue anything else. So fingers crossed, hopefully nothing happens and we don't need to, right? But then it drops down. So it's kind of like the principal payments are front-loaded a little bit so that we can leave room in 5 years or, beyond 5 years if there is a need in the future to issue some additional bonds up to the DSEB again, right? It kind of allows you, like, it's like as you're paying off your mortgage, you now have room for a home equity loan if you need it. So 5 years in, you now have room, you can put in the pool, right? We wouldn't be putting in a pool, we might be taking out a pool. But the concept, that's the concept, right? The way that the repayment structure is, it allows for flexibility for future board concerns.
And there's nothing magical about 5 years. That's a date that is just put in for illustration. So what would happen is if the board chooses to go down this path, there'd be some discussion with the administrative team to make a recommendation. Like, we foresee there might be a need 4 years from now. So maybe we have the client after 4 years, or maybe it's 6 or 7 years. So there's some flux. That's the one area where the home mortgage analogy and the bond analogy breaks down a little bit, because you have more flexibility on how you can structure your payments than we do with a home mortgage. We can't tell the bank, I want a higher payment for 5 years and then decrease it in year 6.
No, you'd have to manage that yourself by trying to pay more to the principal, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So what kind of questions does the board have on these debt service extension-based financing?
So could you also talk about the growth factor that's incorporated, 1.5%, I think I saw, and a 2%? Not that that's of true interest, but I want to make sure that we have a full discussion on that.
Well, in these scenarios, all 3 of them, we are not considering none of these scenarios consider taking advantage of that growth.
Yeah, so really that growth, what it does show you then is that over time, not only do you create flexibility because you don't go up to the current red line, is if your debt service extension base grows, you actually get an even bigger gap. I'm not a big proponent of filling that in and assuming the growth today, because that's really tying your hands for the future. And there's other risk associated with this. What if CPI, you assume 2 and it only grows by 1? Well, now you gotta pay for the difference. You still have to pay the bonds, but now you gotta pay it out of the operating funds.
But in the context of not taking as much all the way up to your D-sub, in the future, if things are great and growth is a reality, and something would happen at East, we do have some additional capacity then to be able to accommodate that if something were to occur.
Right. At that time, if the board was considering issuing debt, we would look at what our ability is at that time, based on all the factors.
You know, depending on the timing of something, your D-sub could be higher depending on whatever the growth level
It
is.
in theory would be, right, because
Mhm.
CPI keeps
Yep.
going up and it's tied to CPI,
Right.
right? So it will go up as long as CPI goes up. If we have 0 CPI, it won't go up.
You know, it really comes down to how much you want to manage your debt. Do you want to go to the top of your limit to maximize how much bond power you have? Do you want to be more conservative and leave some room? You know, the illustrations that Bob is referring to, I think, give a nice visual of where you have that room between the amount that you've borrowed and the debt service limit. Factor into it, you know, this is where accurate estimating really becomes important. You know, right now, one of the factors that you're seeing across Chicagoland is estimates of what this will cost. We will do a bond sale, and then things are coming out sometimes 25% greater than what cost estimates are when construction companies actually bid, right? So that's where just being really astute on accurate estimating and cost management comes into this factor too, right? To give you some idea of how much debt you want to take on. I also think strategically, it helps in the thinking that you've developed of using some cash reserves based on, you know, your own thinking, feedback from the community. We'll talk a little bit about some preliminary survey results. Feeling comfortable using some of that cash reserve, which can be sort of a stand-in between what you thought in terms of debt and what you want to address, if you find the costs are higher than the debt that you actually borrowed.
So, like Dr. McBride referred, the board's current goal for cash on hand, it's 6 to 12 months, but the board we've kept it, right? The board has recommended we keep it at the higher end in the past. And I believe as of the last treasurer's report, we were about 11. And using approximately $12 million, $10 to $12 million would bring us down to about 9, I think is where we were. And so that would mean we would be carrying a lot less. But that's a comfort level of the board. How much of that would you want to spend? It's, you know, it's equivalent of how much of your savings do you want to put towards a project, right? It's not exactly the same, but it's somewhat similar. What kind of a cash like levels are you comfortable holding?
How could that impact our rate?
That would be rating neutral to you, because it would still be a high enough figure to maintain your AA+, which is the second highest rating.
That's kind of where that 6 months is a kind of a, I don't know if going below 6 months would affect it, but I would not feel comfortable with less than 6 months if we can manage it, right? And the reason is, in my mind, I look at it as the way we collect our funds, right? We collect them twice a year. I have to be able to pay for everything within that time frame, and it's about a 6 month time frame. So that's the way that, you know, if I was managing my household, getting paid twice a year, I'd want to make sure I have enough cash to get through till the next time I get cash again. And that's the thought process in my brain, and the way I'm trying to explain what I would recommend as not going below 6. It's up to the board. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if we use some of our cash on hand reserves, we would tap that first and then say, okay, now let's go get bonds after?
I think it would be kind of simultaneous, and the reason I say that is because of, depending on the timing of the projects, right?
Yeah, some projects can be life safety, and you want to use the life safety bonds towards that life safety, and the other funds towards the non-life safety projects.
So Luann, just, and correct me if I'm wrong in looking at this, so from what Eric gave us, these first 2 pages on here would need to come from the one bucket,
Yeah, I
and
know
then this
the
last
life
page, yeah.
And we might be doing pieces of them at the same time, right? And pieces of them at
Right.
different times. So we might need to use part of fund balance. So let's say the board agrees we want to ultimately drop down to 9 months cash on hand. It wouldn't necessarily be overnight, it would be timing of the projects, right? So it might be over the next year or 2 that it drops. It depends on when we need to use those funds. Same thing with the bonds. We would issue the bonds up front, but then it would be being paid down over, we'd be using them over the couple years of the timing of the projects. You know what I mean?
So we'll be using some of both.
I believe
Right.
that that's the way it would work based on the way that the list looks
Right,
of what
life
we would be
safety
doing.
for those projects, and there is a sequential order. It's not a hard and fast order, but if you think about it, roof, we're about to put $2.2 to $2.7 million worth of new ceilings in Central. You would want to have we have a 50-year-old roof right now, so you'd want to secure that. We're done repairing that roof. It really has come to end of life. To prepare a new HVAC, it's going to be awfully important to have new electric and to have new domestic water supply. Those are systems that support that system. So those would have to be in. So there is a sequence there that you're thinking of, and as you do those, right, you might also simultaneously say, for example, you probably, if you decide to move forward, renovating below the main gym, pool, locker room for the CCC, Lockport Academy, we're going to hear from those folks in a moment. That's work you might be able to do even when school's in session, because it's so sequestered from the rest of the school. So all of these things might be happening, simultaneously.
Go ahead.
So if we took some of our reserve funds, that would keep the amount to the taxpayers down, right?
That would keep it, depends on what you're trying to do with that total. So if the intent is to pay for the life safety out of the 26 million, then this would allow us to do the other things that don't follow life safety. The 12 million, we would be probably using those funds for that, right? That's the way that I'm expecting it to kind of flush out. Depends, like Bob said, what actually the total dollar amount of the approvals are for life safety. But I think it would most likely be split, that the fund balances are gonna be used for the things that we think need to be done, but they're not technically life safety.
And from a sale of the bonds, can it be staggered? Does it all have to be at one time?
No.
Doesn't have to be.
There could be reasons you actually want to separate them. We're in a unique environment right now where when you borrow your money, you actually borrow at a rate below you can invest at. And you want to put yourself in a situation where you can keep, we call it arbitrage, where you can keep that extra money, where you earn above your borrowing rate. And there's certain exemptions in the tax code that if your financing is $15 million or less, you qualify for an exception and you can keep that positive arbitrage. And it's done by a calendar year, so maybe an advantage just selling one series in 24 and another series in 25. You kind of put those pieces together once you have a better draw schedule from the construction team, then we can determine what sort of exception you might qualify for.
And to kind of bring it all around, what Bob Lewis and his associates at PMA help us do as an administrative team is much like DLA architects or construction manager might time projects. PMA helps us time debt issue. When is it most advantageous, straddled over 2 years, straddled over 1 year, to create funds to address the priorities that you have.
About the financing strategies.
So let me ask you this, Bob, and I don't know how, it sounds like you do some level of reviews terms of municipal or school district finances as well. If you were in our position, what level of pull from our cash reserves do you feel comfortable with before it starts to get into a territory where it either affects our bond rating, it affects your willingness to sell bonds?
Yeah, I wouldn't anticipate any impact on your bond rating if it was maintained above 50%. You know, you start getting below that, it might impact that. You know, we was just talking to a co-presenter today, preparing for a presentation in about a month, and talking about how schools have just come through a very unique time of, and obviously it varies on the type of school district, but huge increases of evidence-based funding money, these higher CPI factors, all this ESSER money, and that things probably won't look the same in the next 5 years. And the state may not look as good as it has the last 5 years, the next 5 years. So there's some cloudiness in the future, you know, crystal ball of what might come your way. Will you start seeing the conversations of pension shift again? Freezing EBF funding because the state can't continue to put $350 million into it. You know, so with those sort of uncertainties that you always have in Illinois, that's why a lot of my clients, and I tend to agree with them, maintain more fund balance to manage those uncertainties. So, you know, our clients that got in difficult times, and when the state wasn't paying on time, they had to make the difficult decisions to actually make cuts. It impacted their educational programs. So most school districts want to be at least 50% or higher, so they never have to make those tough choices with the state becomes a challenge again. And so, to answer your question, I'd say a minimum 50%, but each district has to determine its priorities and what sort of risk are you willing to accept. And a lot of that also goes to cash flow too. You know, one of the things we talked about in the question and answer time before this is that you know, the fiscal year end number can be a little bit misleading in terms of what a school district has in its fund balance, because that might be the fund balance on June 30, but that's not your lowest point of the year. Your lowest point of the year is April 30,
April 30th,
right?
before we collect May taxes in May. We start collecting the spring taxes.
Yeah, so you get money in May, and then a few months after that, and then you spend it all year long, and by the time you get to April, you're at your lowest point. That's really your fund balance reserve that you should look at, not what you have on June 30. Because if you spend down June 30 too much, you're going to be doing a payday loan in April or March or February. You know, and you never want to be in that situation.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Bob. Thank you,
Thank you.
Stephanie.
We're going after the money, guys, you know? Thank you for letting me have some time. I brought some backup singers, as I like to call them. With me tonight is Sarah Studdard. She is the social worker that works with the CCC and the Lockport Academy. And then Erica Boschnick is our behavior interventionist specialist, the day-to-day runner of the Lockport Academy. And so I asked them to join me today because they live, work, breathe Lockport Academy and the CCC. So I'm going to try to let my slides talk for myself, talk for me, and not spend too much time reading them to you. So I wanted to kind of start with special programs. So the second slide talks about why we have to have special programs. And there are many rules and regulations and laws, and it's the alphabet soup that everybody crosses their eyes over about when we start talking to them. So obviously we have to provide supports and services to students to make sure that they're meeting their educational goals in the least restrictive environment. What does that mean? Well, for the most students, their least restrictive environment is in the general education buildings and programs. But for a small group of students, they are unable to have their education goals met within the general ed environment. And so one of the reasons why we have the Lockport Academy is in order to support students with more intensive needs. Sorry, I'm moving fast, Eric, if we can, I don't know who's operating that. So I'm trying to move fast. So I just wanted to, and I think this is a good opportunity to kind of talk about what the Lockport Academy offers to our students here in Lockport. So one thing that's really important is when we have our own type of program. So these students, if their needs can't be met in the general ed, we have to provide them the supports and services that they need. If we didn't have a Lockport Academy, we would be looking at placing these students in therapeutic day school programs throughout the state of Illinois. Now, obviously, that includes additional transportation costs as well as other services. So one of the reasons why it's so important to maintain the Lockport Academy, and I think I've been pretty honest with you guys, it's one of my proudest crowning achievements in this district is providing these services to our students. And these guys are a reason why. But looking at, like the curriculum is Lockport curriculum. So our students that may need to be served in the academy program, it can come back. So maybe they take sophomore English at the academy, but they're ready to transition back. They could come right in and be up to speed with everybody else and go into junior English here. So we want to make sure that having a program within our district boundaries allows for students to have that transition and that opportunity to get back into the general ed environment. And we're able to address those individual transition needs of students by having this program in our buildings, right? Also, it's very important to note that we have qualified, outstanding staff. All of our teachers have Illinois credentialed teaching. Our social worker is credentialed. We have a behavior specialist there. We have teachers in our program that are certified to teach driver's ed, that are certified to teach English and math. And so we know that our staff are well qualified in that program. So one thing we like to do is talk to our students and hear from our students. And I tried to put some pictures in here to kind of show you the space before they had to move out. And so you can see we have alternative seating and other opportunities for students. And they talk about how it matters, their program and their services matter. Now, I know some of you guys have come on tours of Central Campus, and if I was your leader, I brought you right into the academy. You can see that the classroom space there are some rooms that are very small, right? And we have found that sometimes it's difficult when you're in a smaller environment, and then we have one classroom that's a little bit larger. And so we're moving teachers instead of students sometimes in order to fit everything in, right? And quite honestly, we ended up at Lockport moving over to Lincoln Way North has actually been a little bit of a blessing this year because we have increased our enrollment. Right now we have 40 students that are being served in that program. That wouldn't be possible if we were at Central Campus. I'll be very honest with you. That's too crowded, and that it doesn't lead to good educational environments. So we have a lot of students, and you guys can take a look at that, but you can see that we do utilize the space that we have in unique ways to provide support for all students.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
I was reading the quote, if you go back, is that a kick desk? On the
That
previous
is-
one it was
Yes.
All right, so how does that work specifically?
So it's a bar that will move for a student. So if they're sitting upright and they decide that they kind of need to kick their feet are supported and they can move, and it's not a disruption to themselves, their environment, and anything else.
It won't make a sound when you kick it?
No, it's kind of swings, and it's also a standing desk, so if they have a need to stand up and get some of that energy and movement out, they can move their chair back and stand up without disrupting the class and work that way as
I
well.
might need to see that because it's hard for me to imagine how it can rock
Well-
and how it can not make noise.
I don't have pictures in here, but we also have, oh no, I do. You see that bike over there? That's a seated bike desk. That also doesn't make noise. So there's gonna be students that are pedaling through their class period, right? I'm looking at the smiles over here. Wouldn't be a bad idea, right? If you had a little extra space in your classroom. So that's kind of alternative seating for different students with their different needs.
And if I could just add in, what I will say is that the kick desks and stuff actually decreases the noise in the classroom, because so instead of kids tapping and being all anxious or making a lot of noise, they're using that kickstand where it is quiet. So it works out better for the class.
Correct. So I talked a little bit about therapeutic day schools, and I'm no money managers. I know that the money people are here, but there is an expense to sending students outside of the district, and so I kind of try to come up with a ballpark figure. And if you think about it, if we had to place those 40 students out, you're looking at about $4,500 a month in tuition costs, and then an additional $3,500 a month in transportation costs. So
you know, if you took those 40 students and we had to pay for them separately in therapeutic day school programs, no matter where they're at, it's about $1.98 million in just tuition costs for those 40 students. We don't spend that much on the academy, so, although they all deserve it. I wish I could pay them all that much, but.
And I know that the money is important, right? You know, you need that to function. Speaking from a social work perspective, I've worked about 9 years at a different district in an alternative program that wasn't connected to the building, that didn't have those connections with staff or the transferring to classes and splitting days and that type of thing. And then I've been here, going on my 6th year in the fall. And so the social emotional aspect of being connected to your high school, I've seen plays a really big role in these students compared to what I've seen before. So that connection, that feeling that they belong, the pride that they even have, it is seen and it is important, and I don't think you get that feel if you don't have that space to be in that environment with your district. So.
Yeah, Porter Pride is
Yeah.
just as fashionable on Fridays in the academy as it is in all of our school programs. Okay, so space is important. So we talked about being part of the community, being a porter. You know, it's very important too that sometimes when students are transitioning into Lockport Academy, it's not an easy time for them. And so, you know, making them feel welcome and secure and safe in an environment is just as important for students in the academy as they are for students that go to our classrooms in Central and at East Campus as well. So we also know that keeping students close to home also increases their outcomes. Okay, what do I mean by outcomes? Well, we want them to be living, working, playing in our community, paying taxes, and being self-sufficient, right? So that leads us into our Career and Community Connections program, our CCC program. The numbers of students fluctuate in that program every year, okay? And so sometimes we start and we think, oh boy, we're gonna need an extra teacher, we've got more students coming, or sometimes like, boy, the number of students is gonna be low this year. Inevitably, we end up hitting right around 29 to 33 students every year. It kind of ends up in that range. Sometimes we have students that meet their transition goals. So when we talk about CCC and talk about those 18 to 23-year-olds, not every student might stay till they're 22 or 23 years old. Some of them need time-limited support. They might need that extra year to get some of those life skills that they need and those transition skills that they need. And by the way, I always say that every student can benefit from a transition program, but these are students that have significant needs in transition planning. So either they need support and life skills, independent living skills, vocational skills. Some need help with transitioning. They might want to take a class at JJC, something along those lines. But they're more significant. You know, every teacher will say, boy, they could really use the CCC. Everybody could use the CCC. I could guarantee it if I could. But they really are for students that need some more direct community-based supports. And so one thing that people talk to me about all the time is, you know, when I first started here, the CCC had an office front on State Street, right? And that's totally cool. They're in the community. And that is a model, and that is one way to provide services, and I understand it. Where I differ, maybe from some of my other state directors, is, you know, having us in the building allows for our students to get and access the related services that they definitely need as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the social worker is right around. You
on
did teach
State Street.
You did teach in that program on State Street with one bathroom and a lot of people
And
sharing.
no nurse.
And no nurse.
Yes.
Right.
And
When there are emergencies or calling over to maintenance and having somebody bring toilet paper over, you know, I mean, it can be a little bit more difficult. I was really proud that we were able to convert a wood shop at Central Campus several years ago. And, you know, when we talk about money and funding, all of the equipment that's currently in that space was grant funded. We utilized our dollars from DRS because our program is an incredible program and we are getting outcomes for kids, so we are getting them employment in the community, and DRS rewards us for that work, and we've always used those funds to put back into those vocational programs. And one example is all of the tables that you're seeing in this picture, the equipment, the stuff on the computer screens, everything that's in there, the industrial refrigerators that they use, the washing machines, the dryer, those all came from grant funds.
And we would anticipate that when we get bigger space and allow for more room, that we would be able to use grant funding to make sure that those are outfitted in the right way. And then lastly, Sarah talked a little bit about how this is kind of a bigger space,
Yeah.
but there's no privacy in that space. So
Yeah, in both the Academy and CCC, I've been at the CCC 5 years, and the emotional and social needs of the students, I have been increasing, right? And so I do a lot of different groups or a lot of different, skill building exercises with them. And because they're at a varying degree of transition need, it's hard to do in one room because you have students that can't relate or don't need that skill. And then if I go into the quiet, I think they call it Tomorrowland, it's right next to it, where you're all kind of on top of each other. So it doesn't really give you that full community, learning environment where I can really support them. The same with the academy. There's no private space for me unless they're all in my office, to have like a small group or something like that. So those things are really key, and they are really important, and it's hard when they get disrupted for those students.
And as far as the group goes, in any additional space outside of the classroom, we could have a group of maximum maybe 4 students in that group. So if we wanted to have a group of, 5 or 10 students, we don't have space to have a group that large. And, we have students that have similar needs or disabilities or, mental health issues that would benefit from a group together, and we can't provide that right now.
So this is I brought the experts with me, so now it's the opportunity. If anybody had any questions, we're really happy to answer whatever we can.
How much classroom space does each program take, and how much would you recommend they take?
So we have 4 classrooms, converted classrooms at the academy now, all ranging in different size. I think our smallest classroom is like 400 square feet, which is like, I was like, well, maybe we could put some computers along the wall and that could be an online room. We just try to use the space the best that we can. And then we have another classroom that's about 800 square feet. So they're smaller rooms and they're larger rooms. So we've kind of it's one of those things where there was here's the footprint, this is what we have for you. I mean, Bill Thompson would say to me, you want me to take that wall down again? Like, he literally has. We've let's try if we can maybe move this wall over or change this room. So we've tried to utilize the space, but it is in the garden level of Central Campus. And so that's my way of saying it's not in the basement, it's in the garden level. So people can understand that they've kind of, we used to have a little small kitchen in there, we converted that into a classroom. That wasn't a classroom before, and that's why we have a smaller classroom. And then there's 2 small bathrooms in there as well that we utilize for the students as well, so that, because it's in the self-contained program. And then we have a hallway with lockers in it because all of the students have to put all their things in the lockers and enter the classroom safely. So that space would be considered like 4 classrooms, but it's really 3 classrooms and a closet that's been converted. And then the CCC uses 1 large classroom space. There is some room in the back. Central's an old building, and so there are you walk behind the wall and you can't use this room because there's a grate on the floor. So we can probably use a little bit of that space for storage, but that's kind of closed off. So it's the old wood shop. So it's like across from where the students have the fitness center in Central Campus. It's about a little bit smaller than the fitness center.
And I will say so you have the classrooms, but then you also have the needs of these students that are different maybe. And so we have chill spaces where they can go if they're having a panic attack, if they need some time to decompress, if they need to gather their thoughts, if they need to process. And we have 1 space where at the academy for that, and it gets utilized. And the kids talk about how I can go in there, take 5 minutes, and I can go back into a very small room and not be as annoyed by the 11 other students there. So
you're talking about CCC or Academy or both?
Both. The Academy has 1 space. The CCC has a space. Truthfully, they could use more of that as well because we are seeing more of a social emotional need within the CCC, just to help regulate.
Right, and there's also some of the students in the CCC, I know that you saw a picture, there was a student in a wheelchair, well, they have bathrooming needs that need space, right? So there's changing and things like that, so, so depending on the students that are there, we kind of reconfigure space to meet those,
So how many classrooms does CCC take?
one.
Just one?
Currently.
Now, that's not true, I'm sorry. I know Mr. Oswald's here, he's been very kind to us. We did take a teacher office, last year, because we needed more space. And so we did take a classroom from another area. And I believe we are anticipating two additional classrooms for CCC next year. So, we're trying to move people around.
And the thought really, for the board is, this is kind of the crux of Central. You have large spaces at Central that are not being used, fully used.
Yes.
And then you have spaces like the CCC and Lockport Academy that are small spaces for unique learners that create tight situations. It's trying to pair those facilities with available facilities that need work. Beneath the main gym right now is obviously not proper in the pool, the wrestling room, or the locker room, adjacent to that. But certainly could be remodeled to be much larger space to accommodate the needs of these learners. So that's really the kind of thought. I know we have, I'm sort of looking downrange and maybe reminding everybody of the agenda with public comment. I think that's important. Just want to make sure you have questions, but I know there's a lot of discussion on your processing of all this tonight with a couple of other things still coming up.
Any other questions for us? Yes, ma'am.
Is there, state regulations that say you need to have X amount of space per student? No?
That
Yeah,
really
we
gets
bumped up
into
against-
state school code, regional office of education, Luann, in terms of capacity. There isn't anything particular that says absolutely, a certain amount of square footage implies, how many human beings can be in there. And that's why we work with DLA to say what's the right size, here. There isn't any kind of, extreme, regulation on that. But I think what's probably before you is what is the most functional for these learners and their teachers and social workers, in that situation. Yeah, Veronica.
Can you go back to the slide where it talks about the life skills that they cover?
Oh,
you
this
just
one,
all
sorry.
right. So, I mean, I guess when I think about the space and the needs of this program, I see cooking, I see, I see kitchens, I see desks, I see the ability to store things for shopping, workspaces depending on what type of skills they're working on in order to get people out in the community, washers, dryers, bathroom facilities, tables. Some students might even need to be changed on a daily basis just
Correct.
because they can't toilet themselves,
Correct.
all of those things.
Yep.
So when I look at this, I just see we need to do more for this particular group of
So
students.
there's a lot of space needs. That's what it comes down to, and really just trying to match available square footage with the needs, right?
And again, going with Dr. Huntington said, the goal is to, when these students graduate or leave this program, they are productive members of society. And these are the things that they need to do that.
One thing, just from the state, you use the acronym DRS, and for the audience, that's the Department of Rehabilitative Services in Illinois. Deals with, needs of blind citizens, injured veterans. They support, Illinois citizens who have unique needs. That is the Department of Rehabilitative Services. If you went to L-Town grounds, most of L-Town grounds, really almost 100% of it was funded by the Department of Rehabilitative Services to give work experience to students who need it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you guys want
Okay, next we have Forefront Power Community Solar.
All right. Just as we kind of get set up, introduce some slides as well. Julia Henry from Forefront Power.
I actually think.
Oh, that's,
Yeah, it's the
I'm
one
gonna
day
get there in a
forward.
second, Julia.
Thank you.
I think it's this guy right here. There you go.
Yes.
And just to, want to welcome Julia Henry from Forefront Power. Kind of, we've been talking to the board about 3 prongs. One, you've heard about debt tonight. You've heard a little bit about cash reserves. And then a third thing to take a look at is alternative sources of revenue. In some counties in the state of Illinois, those counties have enacted sales taxes that are alternative revenue for school districts. Will County, a lot of counties in this area do not have a sales tax. But, we've also heard from the community looking for alternative revenue sources. Alternative revenue sources can increase your borrowing power without any impact on taxpayers at all, can lower costs in certain areas. So, the sort of third prong, debt, cash reserves, and then looking for alternatives. So we asked Julia to be with you tonight. I am your slide person, so you just tell me what to do, like Dr. Huntington did, and I'll turn it over to you, Julia.
Great, thanks Dr. McBride, and thanks for having me. My name is Julia Henry, like Dr. McBride said. I work for a company called Forefront Power, and we do solar projects at a ton of different Illinois school districts, as well as nationwide. So I am not going to go through this entire package. I know there's been a lot of information shared, and this is really intended to be an introduction of who Forefront Power is and this additional potential revenue stream for the district. So I'll briefly skip most of the slides on who Forefront is, but as I mentioned, we work with school districts in Illinois and nationwide. Specifically, public schools has been our bread and butter. We've worked with a significant number of California public sector customers as well. And something that a lot of folks don't necessarily, when you think of solar, you think of large infrastructure project, a lot of capital. Of course, we're pitching this as a revenue opportunity, so I am not here asking you all to pay for a $10 million solar project. Works very differently in the world of solar development. Typically, the way these projects work is a developer like Forefront Power is the owner and operator of the project and either leases land from a school district to put solar, or you are all paying for the energy coming from the project. So if we use the rooftop of this building, for example, we would pay you for that, or you would pay us for that energy, and we would actually take on the upfront cost of that project and recoup that investment over the long term. So that's why, if we skip to the next slide, I just want to highlight that Forefront is owned by a company named Mitsui, which is a large Japanese bank that no one has ever heard of, but actually owns a ton of things across the US. They're A-rated, and the reason I mention this is back to the capital investment side of things. Forefront has been around for over 15 years. The team has been together now, and we plan to stay around because we have this large capital partner who could, loan us the $10 million that it would cost to build a solar project, and that would not be coming from the district at all. You would just all be seeing the savings or the revenue generation depending on the type of solar. So the next slide here does just highlight one of our long-term partners. We started working with Huntley, which is about an hour or so north of here, back in 2018. We did several projects there, and then we're also doing one more now, several years later. So we've had so much success, they've come back for more projects. So just wanted to highlight that is one of a few different neighbors we've been working with in this general area. So if we want to go back one slide, I do just want to quickly go over this community solar opportunity in particular. And I will just say up front, this is one option of many that could occur within a portfolio of solar options that we want to highlight here, because there is land that the district owns, whether that's, there is land in Homer Glen, is my understanding, as well as various opportunities at both the central and east campuses. So this particular numbers are about that particular land opportunity. But again, just an introduction of a one way in which that land could be utilized to increase revenue. And so the way that particular project would work is it's called community solar, often sometimes called front of the meter solar. And again, the way this works is the district would lease land to Forefront Power at a rate of $3,000 an acre. So land that probably is currently being leased for
let's say $200 or $300 an acre could increase that revenue stream by 10x. The lease term, ultimately in the 25 to 30-year range, that could be discussed further, but that's what we typically see. And then the other side of the equation is electricity bill savings. So Forefront would be selling the power effectively back to the electricity grid. And then there's a virtual component of it where the district could benefit in a form of, I often call it an electricity bill coupon on the electricity bills that the district owns for this particular project. So that's a lower portion of the overall savings, but altogether, 30-year potential savings here comes out to $5.3 million. So if we move to the next slide, it just provides a visual of how we actually get there, of the different revenue streams, particularly the lease revenue, and then also how Forefront handles that communication with the local electricity grid, which is ComEd, and how we handle that, and that ultimately also benefits back to the district. So I think with that, I really only have one more slide here that is intended just to show, because this would be a quote-unquote community solar project, the district wouldn't be the only potential off-taker or beneficiary to the electricity production of that project. So all community solar projects nationwide, and particularly in Illinois, more than just large off-takers of energy subscribe to the project. So local homeowners, local apartment dwellers, et cetera. The concept of community solar originated because not everyone owns a home that they could put solar on top of, but you could still benefit from solar through this concept of an electricity bill discount that ComEd helps facilitate, because the state has mandated that. So that's a requirement. They can't say no, which is great. And so one thing we've worked on, particularly with public school community solar projects, is this opportunity for the Lockport community to subscribe to the projects. We would give sort of an exclusive period, and then, you know, Dr. McBride lives down the street. He could subscribe to the project and get a 10% discount on his own electricity bill. So not a main portion of the project, but an additional benefit to the community. And yeah, I think that, I know I spoke pretty quickly there. I know it's been a long evening, but happy to welcome any questions on this or solar in general.
So just a couple quick ones. So I know that based on Illinois law, there would be property tax generated after the installation, and that would be something that Forefront
we would pay the difference in the property tax, and because school districts don't pay property tax, we would pay all the property tax.
Exactly. And at the end of the lease, whether it's the first lease or any extension, the equipment's removed by Forefront.
Yes, so there's decommissioning language in the lease agreement, and then we typically post a decommissioning bond with the local governmental authority. And we could add to the lease, if the local governmental authority doesn't require it, we could post it with the district instead, such that if we didn't decommission, there's a bond to draw upon.
Okay. And whether we would do something at the roof, on the roof at Central, or on the roof or the grounds here, or at Cedar Road, each of these is in, from what I understand, 5 megawatt projects.
No, they would not be all. Okay. So it would depend on exactly. We haven't done the analysis of every single opportunity. Again, an introductory conversation.
I mean, is the program, the state funding and the federal funding is based on community solar 5 megawatt projects, and you would do multiple 5 megawatt projects based on the size of the available space?
Yes, up to 5 megawatts. Realistically, for example, if we did the rooftop here, even though this is a large building, it would be much smaller than 5 megawatts. It would probably be closer to 1 to 2.
But on 80 acres of land?
Well, then 10 megawatts, you could go even larger. The issue is the incentive program caps at 5 megawatts AC.
Okay.
And so that's a limiting factor, and then also the ability to connect to the grid. So there is an ability to do non-incentive projects. The economics don't look quite the same, but we have done that with other school districts. The difference is the grid can only take so much before ComEd will charge us $10 million just to connect the project. So there's sort of the law of diminishing returns. With probably 50 acres is the absolute max that any developer could really develop there, given that constraint.
How long does a project like this take to do?
Yeah, it would likely take about a year until we got to breaking ground on the actual project, and that's because of permits, incentive applications, and submitting to connect to the grid. So we wouldn't actually execute the lease until we were ready to start construction. And so all of that de-risking would happen likely over the next year. Given the time we're talking right now, we would likely target starting construction next spring. And then once we start, 4 to 6 months is our typical range for that 5 megawatt AC project. If it was a smaller project on a roof, that could change. But that's the typical timeline right now, is likely a year until we actually start construction.
As an example, the city of Lockport has engaged a different power supplier for land over on the old Texaco refinery. And they have 3 separate projects that are going on there that are going to generate, initially estimated to generate about 10.8 megawatts. Based on the design, some of the exclusions on the property, they're down to like 9.5, and that's going to generate about $222,000 a year in lease payments, in addition to them paying the property taxes, which we estimated to be about $80,000 a year. So just to give you a sense for that, and as it relates to alternative revenue bonds, I think that we had discussed, if it was a large project, if we had a payment of $500,000, that would equate to an ARB of $6.5 million or something like that, if that was a route that we wanted to look into.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Julie. Thank you. And your last presentation for the evening is you are going to follow along with this. We are going to coming to you via Google Meet with a gentleman named Evan St. Lifer, who is from Innovate K-12, who is running our current the community survey that we have out right now. So I'm going to get Evan kind of connected up with us, and he's going to talk a little bit about the survey, just to wrap up the presentations tonight. Take a second, I have to admit him. Hey Evan, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for joining us. So you have a room full of people, but you can see me. So I'm going to give you just a little tour around the room here, so you can kind of see folks. Get a little bit of sense. So our board's all around table. You've been a former board member, so you know what that looks like.
Yes, indeed.
Former board member at what high school?
In New Jersey, a high school in New Jersey. And Evan, all the board members have the preliminary report that you generate. And just for the public here, the reason why we're calling it preliminary report before Evan maybe starts working with us here and telling us a little bit about it is because we've slowly rolled this out. We rolled it out to parents. We've rolled it out. We put it on our student splash page. Did a direct email to students. Then we rolled it out to all of our K-8 feeder districts. And then we've done social media. And now the final thing is today we sent home a direct mailer to every household in the district that has a QR code for people to take the survey. So it's preliminary in the sense for this meeting. Final when we get to the place where the mailer is out and we feel like we don't have any more responses, it trickles in. We'll probably call that final and do a final report. But Evan, why don't I turn it over to you, just some of the thoughts that you want to present the board on your mind. They can follow along, like I said, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dr. O'Brien. Hello and good evening to everybody around the table there. Sorry, I couldn't join you in person, so I'm here virtually. So thanks for having me. And so I can share, or would you rather me just walk through with everyone following along? It's your preference. I can share my screen, or I can just walk through.
Why don't we, board members, would you rather
What does
just
everyone
follow
prefer?
along? Or
I think
your
sharing the
preference?
screen would also be nice.
Yeah, however you, whatever. Go ahead and share your screen, Evan.
Sure, sure. Can people see my screen now?
You got it.
Okay. Great. So I'm going to just toggle, and as I get into this, and everyone can see me, this is scrolling down as I go, yes? Yes. You can see it scrolling? Yes. Okay, excellent. So, as Dr. McBride said, the most important thing is that this is a representation of the community, and this is preliminary. Just so you're aware, we're gonna walk through the report in a moment. We asked a couple of questions, which we'll get to. Long-term sustainability, which is let's try to get people's expansive views on things versus specific needs. Those are really the two prompts. And each prompt is followed by a specific course of action. There's a letter, but I want to get to these responses because you just made reference to it, Dr. McBride. Actually, as of now, my colleagues and I tabulated, so before the flyer went out, we had actually up to 333 responses. So that actually is being updated in real time. That said, I think it's important, just so everyone knows, what is Innovate K-12? We're a data analytics and crowd-based innovation company. And what we do is we use AI-driven tools, and you can obviously ask me if you have any questions about it, to really help collect the collective brilliance and capacity of a community to come up with its best ideas. Now, obviously, we're talking about facilities here, but we could be talking about any one of a number of things. And that's what's so exciting. This is not about Innovate K-12 or what we do. It's really about what you do and your shared vision as a community. That's what I think is so exciting. That's what I think, Dr. McBride, that's what sort of resonated with you, is the ability to pick up the community's best collective ideas. And it's really about that collective brilliance and genius of a community, and really talking about what the community wants versus what the community doesn't want. Now you obviously are getting into that phase of wanting to roll up your sleeves and make decisions that are going to best be beneficial to the community. So let's get the community involved in that. And that's really what this is about. So Dr. McBride, as you say, it's preliminary. And once we gather those QR codes from across the community, we'll be able to update this and bring you an updated version. But meanwhile, let's just go through, and of course, any questions are welcome. As I said, we had two fundamental questions that are framed in this particular way. And again, these questions will now look familiar to you, right? It's, as we plan for long-term financial sustainability, we want to know more about your perceptions regarding our facilities. So that's meant to be expansive, and you'll see by some of the themes and summaries, it is somewhat expansive. However, we're still talking about facilities, and then we ask a more specific question. It's a more practical question, right? And you're only as good as the constructive question we ask. We want this to be co-creative with respondents to be able to give their voice, their experience, their lived experience, their expertise, their perspectives, and that's all evident in the way they answer the questions. The second question, again, is a little bit more specific. So just to roll through this, again, if you have the report in front of you, this is somewhat self-explanatory. These are the splits right now around participation, right? Residents versus non-residents. And of course, we will see how this changes. Where are you a resident of? Again, you can see the representation there from the different communities. By the way, it's also interesting for everyone to know, yes, some of you are probably thinking we can disaggregate the data, meaning what people are saying by where they live and or whether they have a child in a school or not, or whether they're a staff member. So that's also the real benefit of this work. The sentiment analytics charts, I'm just going to scroll through. You can see those for yourself. Sometimes they have little gems in there And essentially, we're asking, it's generated by the type of words expressed and/or the type of phrasing or language expressed. Here is a sentiment analytics chart. So what exactly is this? This is our ability to actually gauge the emotions of the words that people use when they answer a question. This is a combined chart. However, the next two charts that follow are specific to the question. And so this is really important when we are looking at certain topics. And I just want to be clear here. This really isn't a black and white issue. When we say negative, positive, I want to make sure everyone understands what we mean by that. When we say negative, negative could mean curious. Negative could mean uncertain. Negative could be anxious. There are many different sentiments that are expressed that are not positive, perhaps, or glowing, but maybe fall into that. The really cool thing is that now we can actually look, you see these numbers at the end, those are the total numbers of people that mention the word central in the way they answer one of those two questions. I'm more specific to the sentiment charts that pertain to the individual questions. This is a combined chart, but you'll get the idea. What that means is that for any of the words, these are the top 10 words. If you said, hey, we want to know the top 20 words that people used to express themselves when they answered a question, we could give you the top 20. But these numbers here are interesting because we can pull any one of these 232 comments or expressions and show you exactly how they use the word central or campus or east. So I just wanted to be clear on that. Now let's go to the first question, which is all about that long-term sustainability. Again, we are looking for people to be expansive. This isn't to put anyone in a specific lane or a specific category. It's tell us how you feel overall. Now, granted, you've been living with this issue for quite some time. Some people know exactly the way they feel, but I think some of the main themes were obviously renovation at Central, the specific ideas on that. Some expressed preference for new construction. Again, we can know where those people are coming from. I think some of the key questions, I should say values that people expressed were, we really want you to stay focused on financial sustainability. We really want you to continue to engage us and be transparent. And then there was an option around potential consolidation and central uses. Again, these are all ideas that came up over and over, hence the reason why they created themes. Here we just pulled out one quote that we found that was emblematic. But again, as we've said, we have many quotes that we can share. What we do from that is derive this action plan. Okay, again, this is all derived from the community, what the community is telling us. And again, I don't think there are any showstoppers here, right? Take the concerns at Central. Evaluate adding the option of an addition to East Campus. Again, what are the alternatives to renovating Central? This is a little bit more, again, this is where people are being expansive and thinking out of the box a little bit. So that could be something for fertile ground in the future. What kind of alternatives might there be? For some, facilities. And again, over and over again, this is a really, really good sign. Hey, we want to be engaged. Keep us engaged, keep us involved, and we want to help own and have a shared vision around the process as well. That's great. You see the words transparency coming up over and over again. So again, we have these six words or pattern that we've been doing now. And questions here. Yes, sir.
Oh, you're back on. You were just breaking up a little bit. We kind of got you. You just broke up a little bit. Just wanted to let you know. But you're back.
Oh, okay. Sorry. If there's any problem, just let me know. Well, wave or holler at me. You guys can hear me okay? Yes. Perfect. Okay. And please, if there are questions or you want to wave at me, please do. So again, this is the words like I described earlier. These were the most common used words when we asked about financial sustainability, right? And you can see those sentiment analytics breakdowns. And we can go through any one of those, and you can look at those comments. This is all about your words, your thoughts, your vision, and being transparent in the way we communicate that back to you. So here is that question which is more specific, right? Hey, we have these specific needs, and we really have to we need to allocate these limited resources. So tell us, your priorities around how we might do that, right? So what are the overarching themes there? Now we're getting that specificity. Central campus renovation, resource allocation and prioritization. Okay, we heard a little bit about that in the first more expansive question. Again, consolidation and campus expansion. You're going to see some things that are overlapping. Safety and functional upgrades. Okay, so safety is obviously a big concern. That's nothing new. What kind of life safety systems, what needs to be addressed? Again, it's reinforcing to see that financial transparency. Before we talk about fiscal responsibility, this is about financial transparency and how we might be able to share that back with the community, keep the community involved. And here you have a specific quote relating to, second specific question. Central campus needs significant upgrades. It's such a cool building. There are so many great attributes that I love. I would love to see some upgrades that were more than just the absolute needs. What I love about that is, again, I'm not there, but there's someone who's saying, oh, there are cool attributes. Well, what are those cool attributes that might be maintained or preserved, right? That's kind of a cool wrinkle. And then again, the action plan, right? Clear prioritization. Listen, we need to prioritize safety and life safety. And again, these other things that people obviously have said, the community has said now, the specific things that need to be done, high priority. Focus on enhancements, upgrade and renovate classrooms at East Campus. So that's a specific theme. Action item there. Live within your means. Okay, let's be disciplined about the way we do this. Maybe there's some guidance in terms of how we really streamline the financial piece of this. I like this one a lot because, again, to me, it started to think out of the box as well. Speak alternatives and partnerships. Now, you may have talked about this. Again, I'm coming to this new. What sorts of community partnerships do people have in mind? Donations, leveraging existing assets. Maybe you've done all this already, but again, I like the fact that people are thinking out of the box. And again, we're back to transparency, trust building, engagement. Those are great signals that the community is reinforcing back to the district that says, you've heard us, we want to continue to build on and cultivate trust. We want to continue to be engaged. And, we're willing and able to be more involved in this process. I'm hearing a little reverb. Do you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you okay right now.
Okay. So, and lastly, the emotions of the words and the ideas shared for this second question. Again, you can see these 10 top themes. I'm going to pause there. And if there's anything you need me to repeat, or if there's any problems with audio, just let me know.
If board members, just for this, if you have questions, I could take your question. The mic on this is not probably going to pick your voice up. But maybe just open it up to questions for Evan as he walked through. It's preliminary, gives you an idea of the look of the report. Obviously, we hope to double, triple, quadruple the responses with the mailer. That would be great. Hear what people have to think or have to say. But I can take your questions, feed them back if you have them.
One that I would ask is on the sentiment analysis, the gold and blue ones. It appears that every single word has a majority negative sentiment associated with it, regardless of whether it's East, campus, district. What would Evan attribute that to?
So I mean, you're on the question from one of our board members, Lance Teese, you're on the sentiment page, right?
Yes.
And when you look at that, every one of those top words has a negative sentiment, majority. What, interpret that, kind of give us some, indication of that.
Sure. Anytime you're talking about improvements or upgrades, in the way the language is framed and articulated, you're bound to get this sort of breakdown. Again, what I encourage, and I'm not sure the board member, so I'm sorry I can't address you personally, but please know that the really cool thing about this is you can see the comments yourself. And so again, if you're like, I really want to see the comments behind the word central, or any one of those words that we've listed, we can show you those comments. And I think having that context will be extraordinarily valuable. Just know that the nature of the question can sometimes determine where you're at. I also would say, rather humbly, that you've been through, the community's been through many discussions and engagements and voting on these issues, right? So probably they're tinged with some emotion and passion. And so we also have to take those things into account. So remember, this is just the way the intelligence is picking these things up and classifying it. But again, the most important thing you should know is that we can go behind any one of these words and look at responses, and that should give you a lot of really great context. And I feel very confident that you'll be pretty satisfied with the framing that you see, for sure.
I guess I would ask that if we do ever get the individual pieces, which I think would be valuable, all the names should be blacked out or removed so that we don't know who they are. If they are obviously public
That's
information,
correct.
we wouldn't want that.
He said yes.
And there's a separate field on the survey if you want to declare your name, but those get separated, the comments. That's just, hey, I want to share who I am, right? And I think Evan heard that and said, yeah, that's correct. That's actually how those are disaggregated.
And just, Dr. McBride, just one other thing is that when we present back, this is not an unusual occurrence. We often do this, and when we share back comments that people want to see, whomever they are, they're anonymized. That's standard operating procedure.
I do have one thing. So in the other, where it says action plan and even where it says the themes, is it possible to also attribute a number to those? Because it would be interesting to see, like, how many people would say, address immediate safety concerns at Central versus evaluate the option of adding an addition to East Campus. That's the theme.
Yeah, I have to check on that. Right. I don't know if that's possible because that's part of the technologies. We're taking the aggregate expressions and we're teasing out the ones that are the themes, the way people express themselves, and the themes that are rising to the top are the ones that are most often cited. And we don't do that by a numerical, that's thematic.
How about for the action plan?
The same is true, but again, I think there's evidence of the way people are expressing themselves when you look at the sentiment analytics. And so you certainly could get ideas. If someone wanted to pour through some of those comments, I think you could get some really great insight and context from looking at the way people express themselves based on each of the questions and the language they use. Because essentially, you're getting comments in those sentiment analytics charts. And just to show you again, as we're going through this, hold on a second.
And Evan,
So if I scroll down, yeah, like right here. Yes, sir.
No, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, okay. No, you can see here, again, we have 92 comments relating to Central. These are obviously the campuses East student. We could look at these for the person who asked that question, and we could look at all those and you probably get some pretty good insight about what people were saying. I think that would be extraordinarily helpful for you.
And one of the correspondence from the data analytics is, for example, in both sections, the data analytics, Central comes up the most. And then in the action plan, that's at the top of the action plan because it is the thing that people have discussed the most. I see a correlation. Would that be accurate to see that kind of correlation?
Yeah, it would be accurate to see the correlation, particularly in the themes, the correlation between the action plan and the themes. And so, you know, again, these are the things that the community, as an aggregate, the collective expression of the community, these are the things that are rising to the top. And whether it's 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, or 10,000 people, these are pretty reliable ways of gauging. And again, we're super transparent. That's why we love for people to look at the comments if you want, or whomever to look at the comments. And we think there's great, again, insight there. The other thing I would mention to you is that this is supposed to be iterative. So this is laying the groundwork potentially for another more specific or contextual question that drives even further, again, with the community offering their shared vision and helping the board really determine direction and what should be next. This is just a sort of a baseline opportunity to connect with the community and hear their voice.
All right, the look around the table, I think, is that people's questions are answered, Evan. So, you know, for the board and for the public, I'll keep in touch with Innovate K-12 as this mailer starts to hit homes. Like you said, the goal is you get, you know, double, triple the amount, you know, of people participating. If you're in here and you haven't taken the survey, please take the survey. We had a lot of people come in to a session we had before this board meeting, Evan, and ask them to take it. So, yeah.
The first preliminary has a limited number of responses. I'm just saying the people that responded. So could we see some of the responses for that to give us a feel?
You know, I think here's a question, Evan. Can you take these responses, sort of segregate them from the remaining responses? Like, who are the early adopters?
Right.
Versus people who got the mailer and then jumped in. So if that's something we can partition, Evan, that would be great.
That way we can see it.
Absolutely.
Is there any difference?
Thank you for.
A trend or a pattern.
And we can even look at the numbers and compare. Again, if I was sitting next to you right now as a board member, I would be interested to know, let's look at the people who responded, right? And I would really like to know among people who are residents with children in the schools versus residents who don't have children in the schools versus staff. We can disaggregate that data. You know, I think the more knowledge we can give you, the more context, the more powerful that is for you to help you achieve your objectives. Again, we would love to see, I think everybody in the room, right, would like to see these numbers increase, especially in the communities that have less representation. We really want to strengthen those other numbers and get as much community representation from all the different communities as possible. So we want to help you do whatever we can to drive that and get people thinking that this is something that is a regular, normal process for them, and that their voice is going to be heard because the district has heard your voice. We've now listened and processed and really taken the best ideas. That's the last thing I would say, Dr. McBride. We've talked about this isn't a poll. This isn't, this is about hearing the best ideas and putting them all in one place to drive your objectives. And that's what's so great about the community. We want to, again, leverage that genius and collective intelligence and brilliance of the community, which you most definitely have there. We want to make sure we're getting that for you.
Okay, well, hey, more to come. We'll pay attention to what the mailer does, and thanks for being with us tonight, Evan.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.
Well, bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, moving on to public comments. At each regular open meeting, members of the public and district employees may address the school board during the public comment section of the agenda. Individuals appearing before the board are expected to respectfully follow the guidelines of Policy 2:230 and Policy 8:30 available upon sign-in. Public comments are important to the board. However, it is customary not to respond on issues until time has been taken to gather information and discuss all options. Lack of action or response at the time of comment does not imply lack of interest in the issues brought to the board. And first, we have Mr. John Olenardo. Yes, hi. Yeah, you can just come up.
Come on down.
There.
Come on.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk for just a minute. I wanted to participate because I spent some time with Dr. McBride and the community committee talking about facilities since the referendum failed. I asked to participate in that because I was concerned about the scope of the work and what the project potentially could be, or what the conditions of the facilities might be. I have some experience in those things professionally, so I thought it might benefit to be able to participate and listen to the process. And what I found from listening to a couple of the committee meetings and listening to other members of the community and the administration and the professionals and administration that hired was this has been a perfectly straightforward process evaluating the condition of Central School and the recommendations that have been presented and championed by, or recommended by staff and vetted by your design professionals are appropriate and they're being done in the right way. The goals of replacing the basic systems inside of the building are really deferred maintenance and things that should have happened a long time ago. And as a result of the fact that they haven't been done a little bit at a time, just like in your own home, they're all coming at one time. So that makes it seem much greater than it really would have been had it been done over the life of the building. But all of these things are coming to fruition all at once, and we're sitting here talking about a more major project than we would have been had these things been dealt with in a normal maintenance cycle. There's a lot of, seems like opinions appropriately from different members of the community about the school board spending this money. I would just like to express that I think it's appropriate and it's overdue. We have the resources to spend with some, but not a huge impact on our tax bills. And I think that it should be done, and I would ask that the school board provide that leadership and move us forward doing it. Thank you.
Next, we have a Miss Tammy Hayes.
Okay, good evening. I am here to speak about Central Campus again. I've been here before. My name is Tammy Hayes. I actually have a little soundbite here for you. Okay, so good evening. I'm here about the Central Campus. I would like to remind the board of the school board meeting from November of 2023, where Dr. McBride was heard explaining the March 19th referendum. I have like a 10-second clip here of that meeting, and I want you to hear what he has to say.
Repair, renovate, and equip that site for the purpose of updating instructional areas and classrooms. So that's a more detailed way of saying, should this site continue as a school? And then it.
So what we heard Dr. McBride say here is the referendum was asking a more detailed version of should this site continue as a school? As we have been told again and again, the referendum could only ask one question. Looks as though, it looks as though we may need a reminder, as we move forward. The voters said no. 6,960 of them, out of the 13,026 voters who chose to make the time to go out and vote, voted no. For those keeping track of the math, that's 43.43% majority said no. This leaves us with several questions. Number one being, how did the board and the administration take this news? Well, after the referendum failed, They are still pushing the same Save Central narrative, with no other alternative in sight. Recent board meetings show us that they chose to move forward in continuing to use Central Campus as a school, with possibly a $30 million bond that does not need taxpayer approval, but will still impact the taxpayers, as they are the workhorse for cash that the district spends. Knowing that they have a huge cash on hand reserve that seems to be misrepresented at times to us residents, after setting aside upcoming expenses and accounting for required reserves, D205 has approximately $25 million left over, which they only recently discussed using $10 million at the most recent finance meeting. The normal plan is to just raise our taxes. So is this board and administration listening to the voters? I would have to say no. A bit of history for you, and I will hand this out. If you could take one and pass it along, that'd be super great of you. Thank you so much. Bit of history, the local school board grew out of a town meeting dating back to the original 13 colonies. Times have changed, but the function of school boards today remains the same, to provide local citizens control over public education, representing the community and its aspirations for our local schools. Now, I'm not going to go through every one of these, but it's on the piece of paper I'm handing out to the board. School boards have a responsibility to make the most effective, efficient use of school resources and protect those resources against waste and abuse. Your job is to represent all citizens in the school district. Myself and a small group of LTHS citizens have requested from the board via email to have a spot on an upcoming board meeting to discuss some thoughts, ideas, and facts about our district. Time, just like the board has offered DLA and WJE and others, not to be part of a 5-minute limited public spot where board members choose not to comment, but actually have dialogue with our elected board members. Obviously, we were denied, not once, but 3 times. And I've handed out to you, there is a list of times and dates, starting with February 20th. WJE was here for 36 minutes, and the board and student board members were able to ask questions and get feedback. December 18th of 23, DLA Architects was here again for 33 minutes. November, DLA Architects, 44 minutes. You may think to yourself, this might have just been about the ceilings. However, September 18th, DLA again, 53 minutes. So here we are, a reminder to you all that 205's own projections spell out no major spikes in students over the next 10 years, but actually a decline of 400 students over the next 5. Don't you think you would serve your citizens of the district better to do a full life cycle analysis looking at the full cost estimates and risks of keeping Central, plus a just a second here, plus a complete 20-year ongoing cost and benefit comparison of a smaller addition to East. This gives us a full and honest comparison of 2 possible options. I appreciate the extra 30 seconds.
Next we have Mr. J. Rhodey.
Hi, Board. How are you? It's been a while since I've been here. I want to talk about the referendum and the current thing on the table for $30 million for Central Campus. I just want to bring the board, and I just want to reiterate that the board represents the residents, the parents, the children, and the taxpayers that reside in District 205. And you are the liaisons for us to the school. With that being said, you're responsible for developing a strategic direction for this school district. Now, the most recent direction that the board has chosen is to put this district on the path to originally spending $115 million that then got whittled down to an $85 million referendum, okay? The taxpayers were very verbal. They said no and it failed. Now we're talking a $30 million life safety expenditure, which after Stephanie had talked and after the architects talked, seems like it's gonna actually be more than that, okay? So where's the long-term fiscal responsibility in this? And why are we only being given one option? Why are we currently on always, and just, it's always about Central, it's always about renovating Central, it's always about keeping Central? Why not, have we not discussed on this board, a modest expansion to East of 700 students? Currently, we house 3,000 students here, okay? 700 students would give us 3,700 students at East. Now, the pamphlet that I passed out, you're gonna see, this is the District 205 student enrollment projections. They're not my chart. This is your chart. And by 26, 27, 3,700 students under one roof, you're looking at a 3,600 student population, and it's gonna continue to go down. By the time we look at 28, 29, we're at 3,400 students. Now, I don't know if that considers CCC or the academy, which currently I think we're about 65 students. Certainly, this would all fit under one roof. Not to mention administrative costs that we would size down, you know? Why are we not even discussing this is my question. We're not even looking at it. And a 700 student addition, that can last us another 50 years here at one location. We don't have to worry about something else going wrong at Central because it's currently a 115-year-old building. I mean, it sounds like we're gonna be spending more than 30 million if you guys go this route. I'm gonna say probably 40, maybe even closer to 50. Why are we not looking into this? I mean, we've got the land. If you look at the second page of what I sent out, we've got the land here at East. We got the architects. They're here. In fact, they were involved in the expansion of this facility when it grew. And they did a great job. Why aren't we even looking at this? It's almost irresponsible. My request to this board is that you guys do a long-term life cycle analysis comparing an expansion of 700 students to this facility here versus spending the money on Central, which is a 115-year-old building. And then when you do that analysis, it's gonna take in everything into consideration. It's gonna take that, it's gonna factor in, hey, we don't need 2 principals, we don't need 2 vice principals. You're gonna bring down administrative costs, all right? What about the busing between schools? These are all dollars that make fiscal responsibility. And I'll tell you, if you guys don't consider undertaking this, you are not doing your job to the taxpayers. You're gonna fail at every chance you get when it's only one option on the table. You're not looking at anything else. Do the cost analysis. Prove to the people that this is the only route. You might be surprised. This may be a better route, especially when our student population is going down.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
You got it, no problem. But look at your sheet. This is yours, not my numbers, yours. You're gonna be down 3,400 students. You can do it all right here. Cut the costs, save the taxpayers a little dough. Thank you.
We have a Mr. Alan Lusbetek.
Okay, good evening and thank you. Okay, I'm here to speak with what I'm a precinct committeeman here in Lockport, so I'm involved in the community. I've also worked in industrial maintenance and facilities management for 25 plus years. So a couple of things I want to address is, one, from like the state of the central campus, I've just wondered, like, why was this facility allowed to deteriorate to that level? You know, when there was a lot of things I've seen, like restrooms, could have been remodeled, you know, as part of budget. I mean, I've managed budgets and buildings I've worked in. I've said, okay, I'm gonna renovate this area, that, and you know, I can't do it all at once, you know, so. The building like life safety, you mentioned about the doors being set back. And back 20 years ago, building a thing, I did that, you know, it wasn't a huge cost, but it's like in all that time, like, that hasn't been done at Central, you know, thing. So the other little key points I want to make quickly, because there's limited time here, is that, you know, that since the referendum for, you know, the Homer Glen campus, you've had, was it more than 12 years to address the thing of either Central or in addition to East, and it's like, nothing happened. Now we've got high inflation, high interest rates, high material, all of a sudden it's like, we gotta do something, and now, and a lot of it. You know, and then the next thing too is like, we're already paying high property taxes. We've got, Illinois has the second highest property taxes, you know, just behind New Jersey. And of course, with this thing too is talking to family and stuff. There's a lot of family with inflation and stuff, they're struggling. I've talked to a lot of people that said they've had to take second jobs, side gigs like DoorDash and Uber to help get extra money in the school. You're just keep trying to take more. The taxes I pay, it's like 20% of my tax bill is for District 2, you know, 205. So it's like, you know, say you care about people paying their fair share, but what's taxing a fair share? You know, and with this thing here with the finance people, it just sounds to me like what I'm hearing about the bonds is like, how much can we get out of the people without a referendum, to just bypass the will of the people? I mean, school board members, you're elected to represent, you know, the citizens. And so part of the thing is, I mean, are you not affected by inflation, and, you know, are you not, you know, impacted by the increases we've had in our property taxes? I certainly have. I mean, I'm getting, you know, close to retirement, and I'm looking and says, wow, the taxes, that's taking a bite out of, you know, what I'm planning and saving and planning for retirement. And I've talked to young families who say, boy, we're having a hard time making ends meet, raising families. So close is like a couple things. The definition of economics is taking unlimited wants and needs and balancing with limited resources. We need to look at that. And the school's mission statement, you know, I read that, I don't see anything about fiscal responsibility in it. You know, these great things are, you know, there's a lot of things that are really great. I think overall, I think the school is a good school district, but, you know, we gotta not take a bigger bite than we need from the citizens. Thank you.
We have Mr. John Waters. Mr. Waters?
Can I speak this? Hi, I'm John Walters. I live in District 205 in Homer Glen. I'm here to challenge the current thinking of the D205 administration and school board. Why are we continuing to pursue spending millions of dollars on Central Campus, given that it's a 115-year-old building past its prime? Did you not get the message on March 19th when the voters spoke? 2/3 of the precincts voted no. 25 precincts across Lockport and Homer Township voted no. Only 1/3 of the precincts voted yes. That's 13. Yes, you guys are off and running with another $30 million idea to put Band-Aids on an old school building. I'm having this handed out, this one-page document, double-sided with graphs to illustrate the remaining points. On the top page is your official enrollment projections for District 205. As you can see, the projection is down by 400 students over the next 5 years. Look at the projected enrollment for 25-26 school year. It says 3,626 students. Reset your strategy to consolidate the operations at the East Campus by 25-26 school year. Invest in a modest addition to the East Campus, 90,000 square feet to accommodate 700 students, making the capacity of East 3,700 students. Spend at least on Central the next 2 years. For those of you who think a 115-year-old building is not old enough, the state of Illinois just announced that they're demolishing the 99-year-old landmark right in our backyard. It's called Stateville Prison. Yes, at 99 years of age, the facility was deemed past its prime and not worth fixing. So in a few years, our prisoners will reside in a state-of-the-art, brand-new facility. Yet you guys think sticking our freshmen in a 115-year-old building with millions of dollars of fixes is the right thing to do again. Now, the real story tonight. Does D205 know the real capacity of East Campus? Currently, the enrollments records say that you have 2,907 students at East right now. Dr. McBride stated that East has a capacity of 2,800 just a few days ago. I sent a Freedom of Information Act to D205 on May 1st asking for the capacity of East Campus, and I received a response on May 8th said they don't know, and they're going to have to take an extra 5 days to look at the records in the Director of Facilities office while she is on medical leave. We don't know what the capacity is? Based on the Construction Journal article posted in School Design when the 1997 major expansion was completed, the capacity of East Campus was 3,000 students. What? Did the building shrink? Mr. McBride said that it was 2,800 students just a few days ago at the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. That School Design's article is on the back page of the handout. So where are the $30 million spending package for the next, so here we are, a $30 million spending package for a 115-year-old central building is on the agenda. And we don't know the capacity of our schools. We've never considered alternate option to not throw good money into a money pit. We refuse to admit that we have $25 million in cash on hand, yet we continue to plot to raise the burden on the taxpayers and fund a totally backward strategy. There's an election coming up, and if you guys vote for this tax increase, I don't see how you're going to get reelected. I really don't, any of you. If you vote to spend $30 million on a 115-year-old building, then that's just the beginning. I don't see how any of you are going to get reelected because you won't have the support of the taxpayers. Thank you.
We have Mr. Brent Portillo.
Thanks for letting me sign up. I came in late. I apologize. I missed a lot of the good stuff. Facility management was brought up previously. Everything happening all at once because maintenance was not upkeep at Central is just atrocious. The taxpayers should not be paying for that mistake. It should be the district dipping into their reserves to pay for that. That includes the ceiling failures. A couple of people brought up the declining enrollment. In the year 2029, it shows 3,400 students. 5 years after that, is it going to be down to 3,000? Are we even going to need to have Central in 10 years, in 2034? That should be looked at as an option as well, is just doing the basic required maintenance to the building, and then when it runs its course out in 10 years, you don't need to keep the building anymore. You can have 3,000 at East. That should be an option. I'm a precinct committeeman, and my precinct overwhelmingly voted against the referendum. When I was knocking on doors, they don't want any raise in taxes. And there's about 3,000 people in my precinct. And that's what they wanted everybody to look at is, have you come up with options that don't raise taxes for the residents? And that's not something on a referendum, that's something smaller you try to sneak in that's 30 million or whatever the threshold is. That's not fair to the residents. Life cycle cost analysis, I do it at work all the time. I have not seen one yet for any of the options. I would love to see that for any options that are developed from here on forward. Obviously, the life cycle cost analysis works in today's dollars, and you compare options based on engineering costs, maintenance costs, construction costs. All of that needs to go into the equation. And that should be done for the benefit of taxpayers for every one of the options. So the options that I looked at in terms of who voted for different things in my precinct, the people I talked with, was number one, to look at a minor addition to East, and that's because of declining enrollments going down at almost, what, 100 a year, 150 a year. Number two, look at the option of what it's gonna cost to bring the building codes up to snuff on Central. I don't know what that entails, but that needs to be looked at. And a third option would be to try to sell Central and use the money along with the land by Cedar toward funding the small addition to East. I don't know if that's ever been brought up, but it's something feasible maybe you can look at. Lastly, there's a lot of young families out there, they don't make the money that the older people do because they haven't been at it very long since college. They want to move in the area, they have to have 2 incomes plus a second job to pay the taxes now. That's why you can't raise more taxes for them. And some of the families, they want one spouse to stay home with the kids. You're not going to allow that to happen if you keep raising taxes. That's something that's very important to some families. You're driving people out of the area, and seniors are up to their limit right now. They're going to have to go back to work to get more money to pay for taxes. So please, please, come up with options that are based on not raising taxes, do life cycle cost analysis for the options. If you have to present it to the people on a referendum, go ahead and do it, but we don't want more higher taxes anymore. Thank you very much.
Next we have board discussion, reflection. Anyone like to start?
So what is everybody's thoughts? Anything?
As far as having the community, I thought it was a great idea, inviting the community. You know, having an opportunity to talk to all these individuals as far as the DLA architects, the PMA, you know, on that. What are your thoughts?
I feel like there are still like first steps that we could probably take that regardless of if it's building at East or updating Central or whatever, that we could probably take not only as a community but as a board in order to at least come to some kind of a consensus. Like I feel like the first step is having these kinds of open houses, being able to discuss major issues such as this, probably the levy that's coming up. I feel like a lot of the discussion that I had with some of the people, just being able to go around, was pretty insightful, pretty helpful, and it gives us more of a reason for us to all come here and be able to share ideas in a way that is not hostile towards one another. Really being able to have these talks, being able to be here and present, you know, not a lot of fighting, surprisingly. Like, people are not nearly as vicious as they are in other platforms, is all I have to say. Does the board agree with that? Does perhaps maybe having more of these open house kind of, you know, to discuss things in this sense?
Yeah, I think that what we did tonight was a step in the right direction as far as inviting people in and having the different groups being able to talk to their different specialties. We had PMA here, we had the architects here, we had solar here. And our central advisory committee was here, which I appreciate their input on all of this because they are community members that are providing us feedback. Hearing the survey, also very important. I think also looking at all of this is kind of my sentiment and what I've been feeling is how long do we want to engage the community, and also in our public comment, I'm hearing a variety of things. I'm hearing add on to East, I'm hearing renovate Central, I'm hearing build on Cedar, I'm hearing sell Cedar, I'm hearing sell Central. Adding on East Campus also will not lower taxes, and I'm hearing don't add to taxes. So I guess I just am looking for a little bit of more clarity. Yes, the referendum did get voted down. I'm looking for a little bit more clarity from our community as to what direction we should take. But then again, how long do we wait for that to happen before, you know, we have to make a decision, because students are going back to Central in August, and I think that that's the intended plan.
And I think our goal was during this whole time, you know, even from starting from the tours to our committee, advisory committee that we first started, you know, should Central continue on as a school? And we always wanted to get the community involved, and I guess that this is, you know, but like Dr. Shaw was saying, at what point do we then stop getting this community involved? I mean, we've heard from so many, you know, different people.
I don't think there really is a point where you should stop having.
I don't think that that's kind of what,
No.
not stop getting the community involved, but when do we make a decision? Because we're
Right.
hearing
Yes,
so
exactly.
many different things, and we heard all of those things tonight too. And I don't see how we could add on to East Campus without raising taxes, but again, I heard don't raise taxes. So the answer is kind of what we're looking for.
How about the public? Did you guys feel that this open house was a step in the right direction?
No.
Just,
Sort of.
It doesn't really seem like it's catching on, our point of views.
I think from the referendum that was on the ballot, people have spoken. They don't want it. So you have to go back to the drawing board. You have to really.
So-
Well, we said, did you hear what they were saying? Give us more options. They just said.
Madam
build
President, can I call for a point of order so we can discuss as a
I
board?
guess at this point, yes, we're not involved with the public here.
No.
This is our board
Madam
business.
President?
No, this is a board business here, all right?
Sell the farmland,
Okay.
I'm sorry, we heard your
Can we have our
comments.
board business? Thank you.
We were
You asked.
We were asked.
We were asked by board members.
I just wanted like a
Alright.
yes or no, but yeah, anyway, so I think things like this, just being able to get the community out to be more engaged, it definitely is at least helpful in my point of view. Yeah, it's just insightful, but you are right, we do need to be able to make a decision, but at the very least, it is a way for us to be able to reach to our communities. I don't get to see people as often as I would want to. I don't know why, but I don't get like as approached as it seems my other board members do when it comes to board business.
Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate tonight. I really love talking with the community members and definitely seeing more people. It was just really nice, and I really appreciated this. I think that I agree we should like look into more of the options that are being presented and just look logistically. I'm really interested in the East Campus, like expanding into the East Campus, and I think it would also be beneficial hearing from like how its students feel about the expansion of East Campus, because we hear from even our student council members about overcrowding and a lot of students in the East Campus, just logistically how would that look like, and just the best way to get all of our students back, because that's our first main priority.
And I think something that Chelsea said that was good is too, it's sometimes hard to just hear public comment and not be able to have a conversation. I like that tonight was open-ended before the board meeting because we can have that conversation. And like Chelsea said, I think a student perspective would be really good, especially at these community events, because it's not all the time that adults can see what goes on in the hallways and the overcrowding that is already happening here. So I think an expansion would be cool to talk about.
So I tried to put a whole bunch of different thoughts together. And just went back and looked at a lot of history stuff as well as today's information as well. And first and foremost, I want to thank everybody who came out tonight to the fair, to talk, to the meeting, to offer comment and everything like that. What I love about that is their interest and their passion for the district is certainly an acknowledgement of this point in time in our history. And, you know, I read what I prepared only because I want to make sure I capture all the thoughts that I've had over, excuse me, over the past few months, and appreciate everyone's grace in allowing me to do this. I offer this as a voter who voted yes for the recent referendum, and with a healthy respect for all of the work and effort that my colleagues on the board have put into this issue, including the member whose seat I was appointed to. I've been very focused over the past few weeks on finding solutions based on what we heard from the election, in the weeks since the election, preliminary results from the community survey, but also thinking back to results over the past 20 years and beyond. I've been in the district for almost half of my 49 years on this earth. From the referendums from 2006 through this year, I learned that in general and on average, Lockport Township's residents value Central's place in history as well as what it is today, not only as a great academic and social entry into the East, but as a legacy that has served tens of thousands of porters over the last 100+ years. They do not want to see it vacant or torn down and recognize the likelihood of the city or park district taking the building is not viable, nor do they want those entities to raise taxes to maintain and reconfigure it while LTHS raises them for a new school or an expansion. They believe the possibility of someone swooping in to develop it is extremely low for a variety of reasons. That, along with the concerns about redistricting, student body makeup, and comparable building ages were the largest fears of the 2000s referendums, and it prevented a new high school on Cedar Road, whether the school was appropriate or not. It didn't matter if the proposal was for a full high school, 2 grades at East and Cedar, dividing up the feeder districts between the schools, changing the boundaries, renaming the district, or even just a freshman center-sized building at Cedar or East. They each were overwhelmingly defeated because of Lockport Township voters, but the renovation was overwhelmingly supported. In general and on average, Homer Township, and in particular Homer Glen voters, want a new high school closer to their homes and understandably have less of an emotional or historical connection to Central unless they or their kids attended there. Although they certainly want some return for the building to offset the cost of a new school, many Homer voters with little connection to it wouldn't be overly concerned if it went vacant or was torn down. 23 years ago, some Homer Township residents organized to incorporate into Homer Glen because they felt the construction of Victoria Crossings East and other growth in Lockport crossed a geographic threshold that threatened a way of life they desired. That's not a bad thing, but both the development and the reaction created a divide that has challenged the communities ever since. Homer Township voters overwhelmingly voted against Central's renovation, although previous referendums were closer, if not overwhelmingly in favor of a new high school. In general and on average, Crest Hill has historically felt separated from the rest of the districts for many reasons. Not only does the Des Plaines River Valley create a physical barrier, but Crest Hill's residents endured the heartbreak in the late 60s of having a high school built to include them at Lockport West, but then Romeoville and Bolingbrook grew too fast and needed the school for its own students, requiring Crest Hill students to be bused to Lockport East rather than just a few miles away to what became Romeoville High School. They don't have the 1900s historical connection to Central that Lockport has, but they do have a close connection to it because of their attendance after 1964 and its centrality in the district. The district doesn't own land in their community with the potential for a new school, so that is not a voting deterrent, and they are separated by the physical barrier of the valley. But they didn't desire to be bused 6 miles further to the Cedar Rose site in the earlier referendums, resulting in them not voting for the new campus in the early 2000s, but they did support the most recent referendum for a renovation at Central. In 1963, Lockport Township West, now Romeoville High School, opened, and in '64, Lockport East opened to freshmen and sophomores with juniors and seniors at Central before the district split into Valley View and Lockport Township in 1972, a very contentious time for both Lockport and Crest Hill that drove deep resentment in both communities and was another obstacle encountered in the 2000s referenda. Historically, our district communities do not support referendums. Between 1966, the year after East opened, until 1989, 17 straight referendum proposals failed, resulting in the district being on the state's financial watch list and a state-mandated $1.5 billion in 1989 dollar cuts for the 89-90 school year. Those cuts would have resulted in East being closed,
all students at Central on half days, all of the sports canceled, no extracurriculars, and all of the busing canceled as well. The referendum passed. By 1994, because of the significant population growth in both Lockport and Homer Township, Homer Glen hadn't incorporated yet, and a recognition that something had to happen because it impacted everyone equally without the distractions of the Cedar Road land for a potential Homer Glen school. Crest Hill students were settled at LTHS, and there wasn't a question for Central's place in the district in Lockport. But because the district had an emergency need to accommodate and plan for more students, as was given us the article tonight, the voters passed a referendum in 1995 that expanded east to accommodate the 3,000 students and 1,000 at Central we have today. However, the continued growth after 95 and an additional 1,200 students between 1999 and 2009 led to the classroom trailers at East, prompting the new discussions of what to do next that sparked the 2006 to 2011 referenda. Since I moved to Lockport in 2000, 7 referenda have failed, putting together every combination of school options available. A new 4-year high school, 2 high schools, each with 2 grade levels, rearranging the districts, changing the busing, renaming the district, a lower cost new school building the same size as Central, and lastly, this year renovating Central High School. In total, 24 referendums have failed out of 26, and the only 2 that passed were because of emergencies. But I'm always an optimist and wanted to identify the takeaways from this past election and our Central School Advisory Council to help guide us for this future conversation. Here's what I learned from the no voters in the election in March. Some voters don't want their taxes to go up at all. Some still want a new high school on Cedar Road regardless of it being more expensive. Some believe the district mismanages funds and they didn't trust them with the renovation funds. Some don't believe the improvements and maintenance are needed. Some believe that Central is too old to be used anymore. Some believe that school leaders intentionally didn't invest enough over the years and didn't want to give them more money now. Some believe that the district board needs to live within their means, vote for the lowest levy possible, if at all, but still invest more in Central and maintain the same level of service or better for our students. Some believe the school has enough money in different accounts to pay for what we need. Some believe a compromise is to build a new freshman center at East and think it can be built for the same amount as the renovation proposal at Central, or to build a smaller classroom building at East and vacate Central regardless of a 70,000 square foot loss of space. Some have asked the board to be more creative with the use of or sell the Cedar Road land, try to find ways to fund improvements within the existing revenue amounts, and see if there are ways to leverage any existing funds that are available within the current fund structure of the district. Some believe that Central will be redeveloped as soon as it's empty because the development community will do it, and we can use the funds from the purchase to pay for a new building at East or Cedar Road. Here's what I learned from the yes voters. Some want to keep Central for its history and legacy and believe, much like countless other older structures, it still has many decades of life left serving students. Some believe that Central is and can be an even better school environment for today's educational standards with a renovation. Some, as they were in the 2000s, are concerned about a vacant or demolished Central High School and its impact on the community and neighborhood if a new building were built at East or Cedar. Some are concerned about traffic around East and if the neighborhoods around it can withstand the additional traffic at drop-off, pickup, and sporting events if a new building was constructed. Some are concerned about water and sanitary needs, access issues, the stormwater requirements, and impacts to the sports fields south of the building complex if a new building is built at East and don't believe that there is room. Some believe that the renovations could efficiently use funds to regain underutilized space, expand programs, create better classroom environments, and improve learning. Some believe, at a minimum, that the systems of the school need to be updated so that future issues like the ceilings last November are mitigated. And some believe that this is the least taxpayer impactful proposal the district has offered while still providing excellent educational facilities for our students.
Our district has certainly been more challenged than most in passing referenda, regardless of the amount or intent, unless there is an emergency. Given the value disparities between communities and the clear delineations and concerns between them, do I have confidence that a referendum with the same renovation project on the ballot will pass, even one at a lower cost? I do not, because of a majority of Homer Township voters. Do I have confidence that a more expensive referendum, higher tax solution for a new freshman center on East Campus will pass? I do not, because of a majority of Lockport Township voters. Do I have confidence that an even more expensive, even higher tax solution, new high school on the Cedar Road land will pass? I do not, because of all of our voters. But here's what I believe from the homework that I've done since the election. After hearing from 4 construction management companies that have no connection to the district, as well as members of our Central School Advisory Council that are architects, contractors, and construction managers, a new construction replacement alternative will be significantly more expensive than renovation, consistent with the $145 billion that has been expressed on numerous occasions. Construction management firms, even more than architects, are firmly entrenched in the value of materials and labor today. I trust those opinions and our architects, especially when they are heard independently of one another. Our district is not projected to grow, as many have said tonight, for the next 10 years for a variety of reasons. But based on what our demographer showed us clearly in 2021, land use decisions in each of the 3 largest communities are limiting new families from moving here. Our district does not have enough multifamily developments to attract younger residents and new families looking to make permanent decisions about where they live. And our older residents hold on to their homes longer, limiting the existing housing supply. This limits new families locating into our district and will stagnate, and in the short term, reduce the student population for at least the next 10 years. Based on our student population, even if reduced in 5 years, scheduling, needs, and programs, even a classroom-only building would still need 135,000 square feet and require a referendum because the cost would be over the district's bonding authority. But the real issue is that all of our common spaces at East, as our students have mentioned tonight, are at full capacity with only the sophomores, juniors, and seniors. These spaces cannot accommodate another 800 to 1,000 students, making a classroom-only solution a non-starter. The state is removing the 1% grocery tax either in July or, if lobbying is successful, in January 2025 that funds Lockport, Crest Hill, and Homer Glen municipal services and capital improvements. Each community will face varying levels of pressure to either cut operations and infrastructure improvements or find other ways to backfill those funds. For our municipal governments, not school districts, as we do not receive sales tax funds, that is a loss of anywhere between 10 to 20% of their annual sales tax revenue. This is a significant challenge for our Crest Hill, Lockport, and Homer Glen governments, especially for the communities where retail sales tax makes up a significant portion of the annual budget. That will lead to either additional tax needs or lowered levels of service. Homer Glen is working on a solution to their sanitary service needs. Regardless of the outcome, it will come at a cost that is currently unknown, nor how it will be funded and charged to residents, nor when it would be complete. Homer Glen is also in year 2 of taking over maintenance of 135 miles of roads and streets within their boundaries that were formerly maintained, with 40% of the funding coming from Lockport residents who live in Homer Township. This necessary step in Homer Glen becoming a self-sustaining community will come at a cost in the near future, but is a question mark at this time as to when that will be realized. It is difficult to maintain the same level of services and maintenance those residents have come to expect with 40% fewer dollars. Given all of that, I do not believe that there will be an appetite for future referendum increases because it will never be the right time, making it incumbent on us to find alternative ways of not only planning for our short-term needs, but also setting the stage for the future while minimizing the impacts on the taxpayer. However, through all of that, Central's needs do not go away. There remain climate control issues, underutilization issues, ADA issues, programmatic growth areas that are not being accommodated, and in the big picture, a high likelihood of a significant capital expense of some sort that could interrupt schooling similar to the ceiling collapse in November without improvements. Resolving the system issues is the most efficient way possible, regardless of whether people believe that they should have been done in smaller chunks across multiple boards and administrators, but they are larger expenses than the district can accommodate within its existing fund structure without the life safety bonds or another referendum. Taking all of the history, reflections, and realities into consideration, we as a board have the opportunity to step up in this moment and create both a long-term plan as well as a short-term plan to maintain a high level of service, quality of education, and variety of opportunities that have taken us from being one of 16 districts recognized by the state in 1989 as mired in financial crisis to one of U.S. News and World Report's best high schools in the country today, while minimizing any impacts to the taxpayer, something that was very clear in the election. It is why I believe that there is a framework for a solution that responds to what the voters have told us, is efficient, significantly reduces the tax burden from what was proposed, achieves many of the most critical renovations and improvements, and is financially responsible. To that end, I propose the following for my fellow board members' consideration. Work with $26 million in life safety or working cash bonds, reserving sufficient capacity to handle any issues at East, to resolve our most pertinent central high school issues that need to be done proactively in larger projects with a larger investment so they are done efficiently, making up for the perceived, whether true or not, lack of investment at Central. Rehashing our past is useless. Let's carry forward into the future. Utilize a comfortable amount from our cash reserves under the careful guidance of our bond advisors, auditors, and ISBE guidelines to maintain our bond rating and financial strength, to invest in resolving as many ADA issues as possible, a new secure entry on the south side of the building, and the needed expansion of our CCC and Lockport Academy programs. Work with the Village of Homer Glen to investigate leasing the Cedar Road property for community solar that can generate a source of income to support alternative revenue bonds while retaining ownership of the land through a 25-year lease when hopefully sewer and water have reached the site and its value is significantly higher, either for a new school, if the population has grown, or a later sale. If it is possible, this wouldn't be able to start for at least 2 years while the selected company does its due diligence work with the state and ComEd. In between larger investments, leverage an annual allocation from our capital improvements fund, in addition to reserving a portion of the taxes that will be generated by new commercial or industrial developments like Lockport Spring apartment neighborhood, the new Summit Ice Arena, and the new J&A sales headquarters to support a modest investment to accomplish the less intensive renovations that can be done in smaller chunks while maintaining our overall financial health. And lastly, after 5 or 10 years of rebuilding our investments and fund balance, if the funds are available without jeopardizing our district's financial health or our internal fund policies, utilize another amount from reserves to finalize any renovation projects. Does that add up to $85 million? It certainly does not. And it shouldn't be, given what we have heard from the voters in March. However, we can do great things with less and utilize Central Campus for decades into the future until and if our district community would support new construction on either site that houses our freshman program while finding a new purpose and meaning for the Central Campus building. I believe that this framework respects all that we have gleaned from the legacy of referendums, including the most recent one, by trying to be creative with the funding currently available to the board, being as efficient with those funds as the board can be, preserving the legacy and history of Central High School for decades to come, preserving the freshman experience at LTHS, protecting the neighborhoods and streets around East from further disruption, provides an infusion into Central to improve our ability to maintain and operate it at a low cost and efficiently for decades, is the lowest possible cost to taxpayers while still providing our students a best-in-class environment, resolving as many ADA issues as possible, and increasing the utilization of the building to accommodate any long-term increases in population that impact the student population. Minimizes the impact to taxpayers to $35 per year or $2.91 per month for a $295,600 median home value to afford the $26 million in life safety bonds. and it maintains our assets on Cedar Road for the long term if or when a population increase occurs in the eastern portion of the district that justifies a new school, or if voters would not approve that, the sale of the land at a higher value can help support additional programming, facilities, and/or education at East and Central. The communities in our districts have told us that they value Central, are concerned about the tax increases, want us to better utilize available funds, and find creative solutions to pressing problems, all while planning for both the short term and the long term of LTHS. I have certainly appreciated all the conversations, the analysis, the ideas that so many in the community have brought to us in the time before the election day and after, online and in person. It has all helped frame for me what our future can be in a framework to get us there. It was a long way of saying, I believe that there is a path forward that is positive, works together, and is framed around our love for the students and the faculty who deserve all that we can provide while respecting our taxpayers' interests. Thank you for the opportunity to share all of that. I certainly appreciate it, and I present this information to the board as consideration if there was an interest in a resolution type of approach.
I appreciate it.
So I do have one, just what everything that Lance just said, there is like that part of me that made me think, like, how centralized does all of the different things within our school district need to be? Because just thinking about it, Angela, do you feel that you would be more, the CCC and the academy would be better placed at Central or better placed at East? Just based on, I assume East has a lot more resources, a lot more, like, I don't know.
I believe that it would be best placed at Central Campus because of the need for the students to be able to access the community. That's thought about a lot. A lot of our students from CCC need to kind of leave high school in order to have that adult experience. They don't interact with freshman students, it's easier in and out and access for their community-based instruction.
So what is it about Central that gives them a, like, you know, deeper connection to the community? Is it because Central is the literal center of our school district?
Well, there is easier access to transportation lines, so they do travel training from that site.
Which transportation line?
There's PACE buses on 9th Street.
PACE buses on 9th Street?
Yeah.
How far of a walk is that?
It's a couple blocks.
A couple of blocks? Are there, are there not any PACE buses by East?
There are, but the big difference is that they leave high school when they turn 18 with their peers. And if they were to come back here, some of the students, it might provide some confusion, right? Because they're back at high school, but we're trying to create an environment that is not high school for them. So that's why having the access at Central Campus, and they don't have the same schedule as the students, and they don't follow a bell schedule there, allows for an easier transition for those students.
How about Academy? What is the advantage of having the Academy at Central rather than at East?
It's a smaller environment.
Smaller environment? You think it might be also like a security issue, or?
Well, it's certainly easier to support students that need a smaller environment at that campus than it would be here. There's a lot of open areas and many doors and things like that. There's a dedicated entrance right now for the academy program at Central Campus.
Do you feel like if we were to build this is just kind of just an idea out there, if we were to build an addition at East, and this goes for all of the people who are in favor of maintaining Central while also adding on to East, we would still technically need to move some of the stuff at Central over to East, like this East, if for the addition. You're not just moving freshmen, you're also moving, you know, CCC, you're also moving the academy kids. So I'm just trying to.
I think, you know, like the space that we're using at Central, it isn't a conducive high school space, right? So we have the academy that's
It
off
used
to
to
the
be
side and it's not, like, we couldn't put other classrooms, freshman classes in there. Same thing with the CCC, it's.
You would have to completely rework those, because you change those classrooms, at least from my understanding, you change those classrooms to be specially designed for those kids. Only if we were to take those out, we would have to change them back to classes.
It would be two different programs.
Exactly.
It's two different programs.
Yeah, they're significantly, like, we've made do with what we have, right? Like, if I had my magic wand, I would go in there and gut both of those spaces out and reconfigure everything, right? But we've done what we can do with the spaces that we have. So, like, when you've been down there, I've taken you on
Yeah,
a
I've
tour
seen
through
it.
there, right? So there's different kind of configurations and we make do with what we have. I think I would, you know, we'll run a program wherever we need to run a program, but the goal of not being at this campus is purposeful. Like in fact, when we had to move those programs out of the school building, the first thing that the CCC and the academy said is, we can't be here. And we're at the township office right now, that's where our CCC students are basing themselves out because they have access to the community. And our academy moved over to Lincoln Way North because this environment was not meeting their needs, right? So we have some space that we were trying to reconfigure so they can stay here, but we couldn't because the space is, it's not conducive to the type of programming that we need to have.
So Academy and CCC is currently at North.
No, CCC is currently at Lockport Township. We're
Yeah,
using their
Lockport
office
Township.
space over on Farrell Road, and Lockport Academy is relocated to Lincoln Way North with Central campus students.
Now, do they prefer Lincoln Way North over Central? Does your people, does anyone have a preference, or is it just?
It's a long distance away, and it makes it very difficult for the students that are transitioning back to take a class or two here. It makes it difficult for them to be able to do that.
So despite the updated facility, you prefer the location at Central?
Correct. And I think my colleagues over there would agree. Yeah.
And Zion, I think the point you're trying to make is the classroom-only facility may not be feasible because we need to add those additional facilities for those two programs. So we're talking more money than what would be anticipated, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, I'm also just trying to think, when it comes to like, when we're trying to figure out like, okay, try to find out like alternatives, what can we move around so that we would be able to create different space, like, if we were to make an addition at East, I would rather the addition not be just, you know, humdrum classrooms, not just, I want that if we're going to go through the trouble of making an addition at East, we need to have like something specialized. We want to be able to, you know, fit within the needs, because we have a bunch of normal classrooms here at East, we have a bunch of normal classrooms at Central. Simply, you know, making random classrooms does not, as they said in the reports, we're not really having a difference of, or we're not really gaining students, we're gaining different types of bodies. So as long as we can, like, you know, specialize these classrooms, I'm just trying to like think.
But also,
maybe
to Lance's point and what he mentioned in his statement was, we're not only adding a facility on the East Campus, but we're also adding stressors onto this building. So we don't have the capacity in our cafeterias and in our athletic facilities to house PE classes as well as the lunches. So we would have to add additional space for something like that as well.
you know, CCC and Academy only has like 89 students. I'm just trying to think about what can we move around, like the district office. Does the district office, because Central, it's currently here at East, is there any way that we can probably trade certain spaces? Like the robotics is in the maroon room. It would be nice if we were to make an addition at East, maybe we make an addition for the robotics room at East. and then we free up the maroon room, which if nobody has ever seen the maroon room is more of like a college type classroom.
So, but where you gonna get the money from? Where you gonna get the money?
I
They
mean,
just said, no new taxes. So what?
fair enough, but I mean, just being able to build something like what kind of, it really depends on like what kind of space you would need, because like robotics, it's only one class, right?
No.
No,
It's a number of classes.
It's a number of classes. You know,
But what I would say, Mr.
probably no
Navarra,
desks.
is your example's a really good example. You know, the maroon room, you know, there's two different issues. There are issues at Central that are urgent, and I can't stress enough, you know, what Mr. T said. 2 years ago, I came to the board encouraging you to explore renovation, predicting that you would have the kind of calamity we had this year. I would say at all costs, for the benefits of students, we have to avoid that kind of eviction. Again, it's a community responsibility to house its students. If that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what does. The problems here at East Campus are space issues. You know, we have robotics in the maroon room because there isn't another space to put them in there. But at least all of the square footage estimates that I've seen to house 1,000 students as an appendage to this building are far, far lower than needs. They can't be solved in simply a rearrangement or a moving around. We do that all the time right now. They need a far more permanent solution, whatever that permanent solution is. But I think Dr. Shaw said it very well, and Ms. Johnson just said it. You know, the conundrum before people is, if we build a building outside, you know, behind East here, we're doing an addition, that is going to raise taxes. That is not going to be a low-cost item. And, you know, Mr. Teese just, you know, shared kind of the history of referendums. So we're in a kind of a tough pocket, right? You know, with how do you address the viability of Central? You have to house 1,000 freshmen. How do you create space in this building? And then as Ms. Johnson said, how do you do that, you know, without the necessary funds to actually do it? But just restaging things is really just kicking the can down the road. It's not creating permanent solutions for the long term.
How, you mentioned the district office back. When it comes to this, I don't know what other word to use other than stability. What is the stability of the district office compared to Central?
Oh, well, it's I would say if you compare those two, it's an inadequate facility. Its biggest issue is.
Which facility are you talking about?
You said the district office.
The district office.
It's mainly an inadequate facility because it doesn't serve a 4,500 person stadium. You know, the bathrooms are antiquated, the locker rooms are antiquated, our boosters can't really operate in the concession stands. So it's really the first floor and the public access that's the bigger issue, right? Than
so it's not like
office.
ADA compliant, because
It is.
It is?
In portions with the elevator, but in accessibility. So it's not really it's an entirely different problem, I would say, Mr. Navarro.
I'm just trying to think outside the box, just trying to be able to present it not only to the community, but also to my other board members. If we close the gap in between the district office and East, fill those with additional spaces as we say, can we potentially move the district office also to Central? Because it is a lot easier to heat and cool for the employees of the Central than it is for 900 students.
But that would be a big facility for just the
Well, then
administration.
That's true, but there's also
And then where would you put the 1,000 students? And the CC?
Well, moving other additional spaces.
Where?
That would be, again, just trying to like paint the picture, just trying to be able to facilitate, just being able to, because again, our enrollment is dropping down. Maybe this isn't the plan for now, maybe this is the plan later down the line. I'm just trying to be able to like get people to think transparent and be able to see. They do have a point that our enrollment is dropping down, and how many additional, again, just trying to factor in at what it, cause the plan is not only trying to figure out what is the most cost efficient, but also trying to time things in a way that align with not only community, but what everybody is ready for. Because maybe, people say like, oh, our CCC program is so nice. Maybe I want to move my kids so that they can have a better career. And we see an influx of 50 students because, we just released that one video where, we have an auto shop. Those 13 kids just got an auto shop. Maybe there's a mechanic out there who wants to move their student into here in order to be able to train their, like I said, we are, again, when that, what was his name? The
Demographer?
Yeah, the demographer.
Jerome McKibben.
Jerome, that has always rung in my head as to where he was saying that we are going to see a huge, especially if we keep bragging about things like our auto shop, things about our CCC, things about our academy program, talking about how they are really good, they're saving the district so much money.
To that point, what Mr. Tice said, and I want to remind the board, you still have closed
I
session
know, we do.
tonight.
That's what I said.
As you wish, and I really appreciate everybody here. It's been, especially folks who've been with us since 5:30. It's great. Thanks for your stamina. But he brought up, Mr. Tice brought up a really good point from that demographic report. It has a lot to do with development in the area. What's happening right now is that development is not moving apace. It's not bringing in new families. It's the new families that do come in are replacing housing stock that people are holding on to. So the dynamic is right now, today, not a dynamic, at least our projections, if they bear themselves out, they're just projections. They're not actual. But I think this board has a responsibility to think beyond the moment. To think, what might that be beyond 10 years out? And there's many things, as Mr. Tice pointed out in his statement, that point to the inevitability of, increased student population on a horizon that we're not seeing right now. So I would never advise that you do anything that limits the potential of students right now in kindergarten, board members that we don't even know. It makes, permanent decisions. There is a history in this district of doing that. Had Lockport West not been sold, we probably wouldn't be in this room, right?
Right.
Had the 6 previous referendums, any one of them passed, we would not be in this room. We would have had a solution, a lower cost solution, that at the time didn't seem to be a low cost solution. But as Mr. Elenardo said in one of our meetings, we're spending more and getting less. That's sort of the direction that we've headed as a district. And I would just humbly say, we've got to check that. Things are not going to get less expensive, Mr. Navarro. And moving the maroon room around, or moving the district office to central, or putting an addition here, are not going to lower taxes either. They'll go in the opposite direction. So, I might just bring it back around. You have a responsibility to house your students.
That is true.
It's as simple as that.
Exactly.
Perhaps we've made it very complex. We have 1,000 students going to school in another community.
And our job is we want to bring them back.
Right? I mean, and that, I just think, I would ask everyone humbly in this room to wrap your mind around that, as Mr. Tice said. We'd all love to have a time machine, but we don't. And that's where we're at right now. And so, we really have to put that, I think, front and center. You have a community survey, you have 319 people that might not be in this room that are seemingly saying the same thing. And then build from there. I thought, the way I interpreted your statement, Mr. Tice, is addressing the immediate needs and then building from there. moving forward from that vantage point. So.
All right, well, moving on. All right, do I have a motion to go into closed session to confidentially discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony in a complaint launched against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity under ILCS 120/2C1 and for litigation. Oh, sorry, okay. And litigation when an action against affecting our on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which the case, the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting under Chapter 5 of the ILCS 120/2C11.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been second by Dr. Shaw and second by Mr. Thies. Yes, we are going to take a right. Oh,